Hello, everyone. Welcome to this class on Marvelous Designer. This is the first class on Marvelous Designer that we have using Marvelous Designer 12. And there's some features in there that I thought were very, very interesting and I really wanted to have a chance to explore with you in the context of a class. In Marvelous Designer 12, I've seen updates to the retopology tool. They've also made the shortcuts Marvelous Designer 12 a little bit easier to see. But the feature that I am particularly interested in that they have released with Marvel Designer 12 is the Styleline editing, which allows us to edit 3D patterns, or rather to edit patterns directly within the 3D window, which I think is very, very interesting because one of the hardest things with Marvel Designer is to edit a pattern within the 2D window and to be expected to understand how that will afterward convert into a 3D garment there. And so Styleline editing seems to be an answer to that. So I'm very, very happy to see that as a feature. I think it's very, very exciting. At the time of recording, I've had the chance to play with it a little bit, not too much, because I kind of wanted to discover this tool with you here. So I have done a few tests myself to see how it works and to see whether it's something that is worthwhile to use. And I'm very happy to say that I think it is one of the best features of Marvelous Designer that I have seen released in a while there. Certainly Marvelous Designer 11, I wasn't all that fond of it, so we don't even have any classes on Outgang Studio related to Marvelous Designer 11. But Marvelous Designer 12, I think that particular Styleline editing feature there for me is well worth the upgrade. So let's dive really deep into that. So to do that today, the idea is very simple. We're not going to work from a garment that, or rather a concept that already exists and that we want to match 100%. We're just going to freestyle and kind of build the garment together there. We're not going to do anything too complicated. We're just going to use the software as it is out of the box. And we're just going to have some fun to explore how these different new features work there. So I've already pinned here on Pinterest a particular coat, perhaps, that I kind of want to build with you. So we'll build something that is kind of like this and a little bit kind of all of these other ones here that are also suggested here. So there's no particular one coat in here that I want to build. I just want to build something that kind of looks like this, has a little bit of this style. So we'll also take this particular opportunity that we have right now to also explore a little bit how to just freestyle a garment within Marvelous Designer and not necessarily try to go anywhere in particular, just to let our own creativity take us somewhere. So as you can see, I have a lot of leather coats here that all look very, very interesting. It's funny because I never even thought of actually shopping on Pinterest for a coat for myself, but recently someone actually mentioned that, and it's like, yeah, actually that wouldn't be a bad idea here. And of course, Pinterest is quite used by a lot of people for shopping. And now that I think about it, there's quite a lot of coats here that I find look actually extremely beautiful and that I probably would like to buy for myself. You know, like this looks really nice. This looks really good too. And so does this particular coat here. And now that I start looking at Pinterest through the angle of shopping, this is getting a little bit dangerous for me. But so for today, we'll put shopping aside for sure. We'll just try to build something that kind of has a little bit of the style of everything that we are looking at here. I don't know how far we'll actually create this particular garment together there. The goal really is to first do a little bit of freestyle exploration within Mars Designers, say see how we can do that. How can we just start to have a little bit of fun? And of course, to explore mostly the Styleline editing features of Marvelous Designer. So I'm just going to go ahead here, start the software, and let's go to town on this. So I have the software here that's ready to go. This is stock Marvelous Designer 12. I believe I may have changed a shortcut or two here and there, but really not that much. This is pretty much out of the box, the software there. So we'll talk also about shortcut customization. The fact that I really didn't want to customize too many shortcuts ahead of time because I wanted to go through these with you. So we have our Styleline editing buttons that are right here, but there aren't any shortcuts for these that I can see here by default. So we'll probably also assign a few shortcuts to different functions here or there. It's going to be also a little bit of a refresher as to how to go about using Mars Designer out of the box as we, how do we get started with this particular software. So let's go ahead here then, and within our library here on the left, let's go within avatar, and let's just use the female V2 stock avatar here as a starting point for our garment. I have changed my shortcuts within Marvelous Designer so that they are the same as with Maya because it just feels comfortable for me. Of course, the type of navigation that you use, you can set that the first time that you launch Marvelous Designer, and you can set that to whatever feels comfortable to you. And also perhaps interesting to note here that I am working with centimeters. So there too, if you're a starting Marvelous Designer for the first time, you have a little dialog box that shows up, asks you what is the navigation mode that you would like to use, whether the default one, the Maya one, 3ds Max one, and also what is the default unit that you would like to work in. So if you're creating character art for video games or for VFX, working in centimeters is definitely the way to go there. Very, very simple. Essentially, what we want to do is to start building a coat over this particular avatar. And as we said, we're not working from a particular concept here. So we're just going to freestyle here. And that gives you a little bit of a chance to see how can we freestyle things within Marvelous Designer, because I think that it is very interesting to do that. Sometimes, if you have an evening that is free and you just want to have some fun, you don't necessarily need to always work from a predefined concept. Sometimes freestyling is a way to just let your creativity run wild and take you somewhere that you otherwise would not go into. So we'll just create a rectangle here for the front of the coat. For the back of the coat, we'll sew these together and we will simply build our garment from there. So here I'm just going to press S within our 2D pattern window to create a rectangle. So let's just go ahead, just create a rectangle here. I'm going to create here my rectangle on only one side of the body, as you can see. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to press Z within our 2D pattern window so that we can select edges. And I'm going to select the edge here that is near the center line of the character. I'm going to right click on it and we are going to do unfold symmetric editing with sewing. We can take that here, just perhaps move it so that it's nice and centered within our 2D window. Within our 3D window then, we'll simply press Ctrl C, Ctrl V to duplicate this particular pattern towards the back of the character so that we have both a front and a back panel for our coat. We just press W here to make sure that I am, or rather Q here, select move here. I'm just going to grab this particular panel, move it a little bit towards the back. This is our back panel. Let's take it, let's move it to the side. And then with the back panel selected, let's do a right click on it within our 3D window and let's do a flip normal on this. We could set a shortcut for that, of course. By the way, if you are new to Marvelous Designer 12, the other feature that's kind of interesting, not as much as the Styleline editing, but still is interesting, is if you click on any of these arrows here. Now, this is a new feature of Marvelous Designer 11, I believe, that all these panels are now modular. So this is very similar to Blender, in fact, where every panel that you have everywhere can be anything that you want it to be, really. This was a feature of Marvelous Designer 11, if I'm not mistaken. But the thing that's interesting that they have added within Marvelous Designer 12 is that you can click on, let's say, the property editor that is right here and go within hotkey list. Unfortunately, I haven't found a way here to expose some of the functions that do not have hotkeys yet. So that would be fun if that was there, but it's not there. But at least we can see what are the shortcuts that are already applied somewhere. And we can actually this can serve as a nice refresher as to what are the default shortcuts of Marvelous Designer, what can we click on. I am actually interested right now to just wonder if there is a way to, if we do customize our shortcuts, if they do show up within the list that is here. Because if we look anywhere in here, we won't actually find a flip normal here because there is no default shortcut there. But I'm curious if I apply a shortcut to flip normal, whether that will show up in one of these drop downs that is here. So that would be, where would that even be to begin with? In fact, it would probably be within perhaps within the 3D window, perhaps within pattern. I'm not actually sure. I guess we'll see. We'll see if it shows up anywhere, but we certainly do not have a flip normal in here anywhere. And I believe we don't have that within the 2D window either, right? So we do not anywhere. So cool. Okay. Yeah, let's just give this a try. This is a class where this will be a very, very freeform style class, just like the garment that we will build together here. So let's go to settings, preferences. Let's go to preferences. Let's go to hotkeys. Rather, let's go to shortcuts. And in here, if I do Alt N, which is actually what I would like to assign, we don't have anything assigned to that. So that's really wonderful. So I'm going to apply that on the flip normals. Of course, you could apply anything to anything, really. The moment that a shortcut is free, you're free to apply that on anything that you want, of course. But in this case here, Alt N feels good to me. So okay, let's go for flip normal here. So we have here shortcut key. There is nothing applied to that. Let's go ahead and apply Alt N as a shortcut. Let's see here. There you go. That's going to be applied as our flip normal shortcut. If I do Alt N here, there it is. Life is good. Let's click close. Now, what I wanted to see was whether it would actually show up here within this list, and to make sure that this list is not only the default shortcuts, because that would be a major oversight if that was only the default shortcuts of Marvelous Designer that would show up in here. So looking through here, I cannot find my Alt N shortcut here within a 3D window. We go within pattern, select move. We have these default buttons that are there, move tool. Yeah, I cannot actually find the Alt N shortcut I have just applied here. I'm actually going to even go so far as restart Marvelous Designer, because this seems like an oversight. If our custom shortcuts do not show up in here, that's a bit of an oversight, unfortunately, because I really like this feature just looking at a hotkey list. But if all we see is the default shortcuts in Marvelous Designer, that's not great here. So I'm actually just going to save this out, see if I restart Marvelous Designer, if the shortcut that I have just applied shows up somewhere. So I restarted Marvelous Designer. If I right click on a pattern here, our flip normal here is still applied as a shortcut. And within our hotkey list here, within both our 2D window, we'll go to properties here. I cannot see flip normal anywhere. So that's a bit of an oversight. That kind of sucks. It makes the usage of this particular hotkey list a little bit limited. So that kind of sucks. There's nothing else I can really say about that. Oh well, this was a nice feature, but hey, maybe in future versions, future updates, maybe they will change that to something better. Anyway, I just wanted to give that a try to see what we could get out of that particular feature. There's also, they've added Marvelous Designer 12 to animation layers, which I think is really, really, really cool. It's going to be a topic for another class, perhaps. We're not going to play around with that yet, but I'm very, very, very happy to see that they have expanded the features that are available within the animation tab of Marvelous Designer, because it always felt like a tab that was there as a bit of a placeholder for more interesting things. And so they have added those animation layers, which means we can do multiple animations for a particular garment, blend them together, these sorts of things. That is fantastic. So as far as I'm concerned, Marvelous Designer 12 is a very, very, very cool update to Marvelous Designer, and I can't wait to delve into those animation layers. But again, that will be a topic for a future class. Okay, so we wanted to mostly focus today on the Styleline editing features of Marvelous Designer 12 and every other little quality of life improvements that they have made in this. I'm not going to lie, okay, Marvelous Designer 11 was a big disappointment for me. Because it was not even possible within Marvelous Designer 11, or at least within the original versions of the software. Perhaps they have patched that in later versions. I haven't actually tried. But when I did give Marvelous Designer 11 a try, it was not even possible within the 3D window to press M to go within, to add a free sewing line somewhere, and to be able to either edit our free sewing line within the 2D window or within the 3D window. It was not even possible to do that. And in fact, it was even impossible to get to free sewing within the 3D window through a shortcut, as weird as that sound. It's almost as if when you pressed M, it would allow you to go within free sewing mode within the 2D window, but you could not do it within the 3D window, as weird as that sounds. And so Marvelous Designer 11 was a huge, huge disappointment for me. It really, really was. But Marvelous Designer 12, it just works the way that it's supposed to. You press M within the 3D window or the 2D window, it doesn't matter. And here we go, you are within free sewing mode. And I find that absolutely, absolutely cool. The only difference here, it's a very minor thing, but if you're actually creating a free sewing within the 3D window, you actually have to double click twice to end your free sewing on the first part of your garment. And then we can do the same thing on the second part of the garment here. So let's just snap it until it's at the proper height here. So we have to double click to end our free sewing. Whereas if we do it within the 2D window, we just had to click once. That's a kind of odd difference in behavior between the 3D window and the 2D window, but it's not the end of the world, really. We can get used to that fairly quickly here. Then, of course, we can press B to edit our sewing afterward if I want it to be perhaps a little bit higher here. And I can do the same thing on this side here. So it works the way that it is supposed to, which I think is really, really fantastic. Marvelous Designer 12 is a breath of fresh air. Let's go here, add another free sewing here to the top so that we can sew the double click here to finish our sewing line. Let me do that again. And we can sew over the shoulders just like that. And there you go. We have our basic potato sack that is created for our jacket here. So I'm just going to simulate, as you can see, just to close it up together. And there you go. We're done with our shirt. That is all the class for today, folks. That's a joke, of course. No, this is just a starting point, but it gives us a chance to build a garment directly within a 3D window, which I think is really, really, really fantastic. So, okay, so those Styleline editing tools, I'm so excited to use those. So we will find them right here within our 3D toolbar right here. In fact, I'm just going to close here the library. We don't need that for now. Let's just close it completely. So yeah, our Styleline editing. There's no, as you can see, there's no default shortcuts to this. I assume that very quickly I will want to use particular shortcuts for these. But for now, we can just click manually on these and explore those ourselves. We can also detach this. I don't know whether that's a new feature 12 or 11, but it's really cool that we can actually detach a little menu here. So worst case scenario, we can always just keep it here if we don't want to play around with shortcuts yet. Anyway, so Styleline editing, that allows us to do changes to our garments within the 3D window directly. As far as I could see, they're all very, very useful, but the one that I've kind of gravitated towards the most right now is just this edit Styleline that is right here. And this simply allows us to take points within the 3D window and just move them. So I can actually move, as you can see, I can move this particular line towards the bottom here, and it's just going to do the changes that needs to be changed to the garment pieces to conform the garment to the changes that I'm doing within the 3D window. And the fact that it is doing those changes to multiple patterns at any one time, you know, as you can see here, this particular pattern here, this pattern piece has gotten a little bit shorter. This one has gotten a little bit longer. It is fantastic. It makes editing patterns so much easier within Marvelous Designer 12. So I'm very, very excited about the future of Marvelous Designer simply based upon this particular feature alone. In this particular case, so I do want to start to create a better collar here, of course, so that she can breathe a little bit better and not feel constrained by this potato sack that she has right now. So just editing the Styleline in this particular case won't be enough because I actually need a point here where we have stopped our seam here. As you can see, if I put my cursor over this particular line here using the edit Styleline function here, you can see that I am editing the whole curve, which is a little bit too much. So what I want to do is to add one vertex here, pretty much at the end of our sewing line. So what we're going to do, we're going to press B to select our seams. I'm going to select the seam that she has here over the her shoulders. Every time we have a seam somewhere, we always have this tiny little line that crosses the seam somewhere, which tells us on which side is the start and on which side is the end of the seam. So right now, if I want to add a vertex at the end of this particular seam, I want to add a vertex at what is the end of the seam. Selecting my seam, right-clicking on it, and we're going to do add point to pattern on end right there. We could do the same on the back, actually. That wouldn't be a bad idea. So I'm going to select the seam again, and we're going to do the same thing here. Right-click on this particular seam, add point to pattern on end. So now we have an actual vertex that has been added where we have stopped our seam. Let's take our Edit Styleline button here once again. Click on the front pattern, click on this little dot that is here, and you can see now that my cursor, actually, if I put my cursor over this particular edge, it is only highlighting the edge from the center point to the vertex that we have now added. So I can take the front here of the shirt, or the vest rather, I can just move it down, as you can see, create a little bit of a V-neck like that. Really wonderful. I can click spacebar yet again to do a simulation, let it all rest, and we can continue editing this particular pattern. Let's do the same on the back. I'm not going to create a V towards the back, but maybe just bring this vertex down here a little bit. Simulate again. We've got a nice curve here towards the back. That's wonderful. The Edit Styleline has given us curves, as you can see, on the front and on the back. And perhaps what I would do right now is perhaps try to round out here the opening to the collar here. So once again, using the Edit Styleline here, I can actually click on a curve somewhere and I can edit the curve, as you can see. So it's not just about moving points, but I can also edit the curve here. So I can make this particular curve here look a little bit rounder, perhaps. I can also take the back here and do kind of the same thing. Try to really round this out here. And then perhaps continue tweaking this here. Let's take this point, moving inward a little bit. And just keep on tweaking this particular curve until I'm getting something that's nice and round. Now, as we want to sketch out this particular garment, we're not going to be overly worried about getting the exact curves 100% everywhere. I think I'm actually quite happy with this right now, so pretty good. We could take this point, move it a little bit further inward so that it's sitting nicely over the trapezius. So why don't we go ahead and do that here? And there you go. Every time I'm just doing changes, resimulating a little bit, and this just allows me to just work in a very, very intuitive manner. So I find this absolutely wonderful. The other features that we have, if we can just talk about those very quickly here, but we will spend more time to play around with those as it goes. But just to do a presentation of those 4 different Styleline features that are here. Scale here allows us to take an opening. So let's say the opening here that is at the bottom of our future code here. I can take it and I can scale it up or down, and it will have, as you can see, it's going to change within the 2D pattern window. It's going to change pretty much everything that it needs to do to make the opening to this particular, I guess it's a shirt right now. Let's call it a shirt. To make this particular opening to the shirt wider near the base there. So it makes, or rather what would be the hem in this particular case, it makes all the changes that it needs to do to make that happen to all of the connected patterns. So that is an absolutely, absolutely wonderful tool. I could make, at the same time, could make the collar wider, could make the collar narrower. And it's just very, very intuitive to use. Let me just revert here the changes. I don't actually want to make this as wide as it was, but we can do it. And that's really, really cool. The Move Styleline button that is right here allows us to take an edge, an open edge somewhere. So once again, we can take the bottom here of the shirt and we can either move it up or move it down. So make it longer, make it shorter. And same thing happens. You can see all the changes get propagated to all of the different patterns that we have within our 2D window automatically. Finally, the Draw Styleline button allows us to add cuts within our garment directly. So I could cut, let's say, from here all the way to this part here, perhaps. You can see I can just add a cut like that. Very, very simple. It cuts and sews the garment where it needs to within our 2D pattern window. If I press B here, you can see that there's even a seam here that has been curated. So absolutely wonderful tools. I love these. They make sketching out garments within Marvelous Designer very, very nice, very intuitive, which, to be honest, even makes me question whether there's even a need for the pipeline that I have outlined previously within Outgang of sketching out a garment within ZBrush and afterward doing all the steps required to integrate that afterward within Marvelous Designer. For me, there's a lot of garments now that can just be created straight within Marvelous Designer, and we don't even need to work with external software. So I find that fantastic. It also makes me realize that I probably will have to re-record a lot of classes on Outgang, but hey, that's the nature of these constant updates to softwares. And I would rather have it this way than any other way, really. So I'm very, very, very happy to see all of these tools within Marvelous Designer 12. So let's edit this together then. So let's go ahead and start to make this a little bit more fitting to the particular character that we have. So let's go ahead here, take a perhaps Move Styleline. I want to make this a little bit longer, of course, as a coat. So let's go ahead and do that. I, of course, want to make sure that the front of the shirt and the back of the shirt all kind of more or less and perhaps around the waistline here. So here, let's go ahead to edit Styleline. I'm going to take the center point that is right here, and I'm going to move it down. I'm going to actually kind of create a little bit of a V like this. I think that could actually look pretty cool if I was to do something like that on the front. Let's do that on the back as well. Every time you can see, I'm essentially doing changes using these Styleline editing tools. And then afterward, I'm pressing spacebar to simulate, let the garment rest a little bit. You can't use the Styleline editing tools while you are simulating. That would be great, though, if you could actually do that, but perhaps a little bit unstable. So that is essentially the idea then. We do our changes, simulate, and just do this kind of back and forth. Here, I'm going to have to add another point. If I use my Edit Styleline button here over this particular edge that is right here, you can see that once again, the edge that gets edited is the whole edge all the way over to including the arm size. So we need to add a little bit, a point here, just like we have done on the collar there. So once again, within our 2D pattern window, let's press B to select our seam. That is this side seam here, and right click on it, add point to pattern on end. Of course, once again, I'm looking to see where the little cross is over my seam so that I know whether I need to add a point to the start or to the end of the seam. We're going to do that on both sides here. Resimulate here. And once I take my edit styleline button here, once again, you can see that now I am editing only the seam that goes from the bottom of the shirt to the beginning of the arm side here. So I can take this particular point here, perhaps move it down a little bit, give her a little bit more of a breathing room for her shoulders. And let's start shaping a little bit more, perhaps the arm side itself. So because we're trying to build a coat that will be nicely fitted to the character, what we're essentially looking for is to have this particular arm side to be nice and straight. We don't want to have a curve like this that we currently have. So we need to edit the curve of this particular arm side then. I also want at the same time to take the point here that is right here and move it higher on the shoulder. Somewhere about here or so. That should be pretty good. And then afterward, take the curve that is here, again with the Edit Styleline button, and try to make it nice and straight. So I'm just bringing this curve in here. I'm just straightening it out, and we're going to do that in both the front and on the back here. So see, like, doing these kind of changes in Marvelous Designer 10 or 11 would require us to do these changes directly within the 2D pattern window. But because of this styling editing feature, we can now do this within the 3D window, and I find that extremely, extremely cool. So we're just going to continue to shape our arm side here, try to get something that is nice and round. And let's see how far we can get with this without having to do any changes within our 2D pattern window directly. Let me check quickly. Press Alt-7 to see what is the stretch map, see if there's any kind of intense stretching going on anywhere. There is a little bit around the neck, as you can see, so around the shoulders. So let's see what we can do about that. Perhaps try to make the, edit perhaps this curve that is here, try to make it a little bit bigger. See if there's a way to release a little bit of that tension that is there. Of course, I mean, some of that does come from the fact too, of course, that the garment is resting over her shoulders. So obviously the gravity will make it so that we will have a little bit of tension here, no matter what. So this is probably fine for now. And yeah, that's probably as good as we're going to get it for now. Of course, we always will have a few folds that are appearing just because of the nature of the fabric right here. It's a 2D piece of fabric that is wrapping on a 3D shape. So of course, we'll have some folds somewhere. Making the front here a little bit further down. Here I could play here with the curve. If I want to have something that creates a little bit of a point like this, a little bit of a geometric point, that's one of those where I probably will have to edit the pattern directly within our 2D window. But you can see here, actually, even with these style and editing tools, I can actually kind of make this a little bit more angular, perhaps. So that's kind of cool, actually. I don't need yet to go within our 2D pattern window to do those changes. Can perhaps do the same here on the back if I want to get this to look like a bit of a point, an angular point. Yeah, pretty cool. Pretty cool. See, so it's actually very easy. Like we've just created here a basic type of camisole, I guess. So it's very, very easy, as you can see, to just use those tools and manipulate the garment within our 2D window. And that's really our 3D window, in fact. That is really, really cool. Now, I'm not going to add the sleeves right away. I actually kind of want to get the basic here. You can see how nice, by the way, this arm side is starting to get here. So I'm very, very happy with that. Before we do actually add any sleeves to this, I'm just going to try to fit the center, perhaps, of the garment to the character a little bit better. So there's a lot of bagginess here towards the back, of course. If I press Alt-4 here, I will go within transparency view. And you also press Alt-7 to get rid of the stretch map. So, of course, we have to remove a lot of the mass here that is on the back if we want to have something that's nicely fitted. And on the front too, we need to look into this here. So pretty much all female garments that are nicely fitted have something that we call a princess seam, which is just a seam that runs on the front of the character and crosses over the boobs. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's not the best language to use, but that is what it is, really. So we want to add that princess seam so that we can actually get the front of the shirt to be a little bit more fitted to the character there. So that's where we can use our draw styleline button that is right here. And actually, I'm going to press Alt 4 again to be in transparency mode here. So we're going to add our princess seam. We could start it anywhere, really. There's no rule that says where this particular princess seam starts. We could even have a dart if we only wanted to have just some type of incomplete cut through the garment. But in this particular case, the only thing that is important is that this particular princess seam crosses over the boobs, over the center of the boobs. That's really the important part. But it doesn't matter where it starts. We could actually build this in any kind of other way that we want here. So I'm going to start from the shoulders here. And we're just going to keep here. I'm going to press a few times here to control this curve as we go down. And I'm just going to cross here over the center of the breasts. And we're going to go towards the edge where the hem is. And there you go. We have just cutted out our princess seam. I'm going to simulate here again. And you can see what it looks like. Very, very cool. We want to edit this curve now. So let's go with an edit Styleline. And I just want to try to get this curve to be as straight as I possibly can get it to be. Pretty happy with that. If I want to, I could, there's a little bit of a curve here. I don't really mind that. But of course, we always have the option of taking the point that is here, moving it towards the outside perhaps a little bit, as you can see. And it does all the changes that it needs to all of the garments that are connected together. So once again, fantastic tool. I love this tool. Yeah, so that's looking pretty good to me. I'm very, very happy with that. And let's do the same on the back, actually. So what's pretty common over the back is actually to, as opposed to have a seam that starts from the shoulder and makes all of its way down, is to actually have a seam here. If I use the draw Styleline button right here, once again, a seam that starts from kind of the midpoint here of the arm side, if we look at it from the back there. So somewhere around here, and kind of curves to more or less follow the shape of the scapula here, and then curves towards the bottom here. So let's do the same thing. We're going to add a seam that more or less looks kind of symmetrical with the one that is happening on the front for the most part, but as opposed to connect to the shoulder directly, this particular seam now curves where our scapula is until it reaches more or less the mid height of our arm side. And so we have all the seams that we need, and we can now start to edit this pattern a little bit better so that we are getting a garment that fits a little bit better. If we press Alt 4 here to look at our garment with transparency, you can see we still have that bagginess that is there. So we want to try and edit that out as much as we can. Also, while we're there, perhaps we could actually edit this particular Styleline, try to get rid of a little bit of the curve that is here. Not strictly necessary, but we could try. See what can I do with that. See, if I just move this curve here inward a little bit, I can get a line here that's a little bit straighter. So I kind of like that. I like to keep these pieces as geometric as they can be, really. And now what we want to do is to start to remove a lot of the fabric that is over the back. And what we want to do is to press Alt 4 just to see where's the angle change happening here on the back of the character. So in terms of height, we're sort of going from this this kind of concave curve that we have over the body. We more or less change direction at here. That's kind of like the deepest point of the back here. So I kind of want to create a bit of an angular line for the garment. I want the garment to nicely follow the back of the character there. So what we need to do is to remove some of the fabric here on the horizontal axis, so that having less fabric here will force the garment to be closer to the body. That's also called a dart. When we do that, when we want to remove part of the fabric within the patterns that already exist. Although technically this won't be a dart because we're going to remove fabric in between these two panels that are here. But had we not separated out the back, we could do the same by adding a dart in here, kind of a diamond cut through the fabric and then closing the fabric together. So that might be a little bit hard to do with the Styleline editing because I can't just take this particular seam here and then try to move it closer. You can see yes, it will make, let's say this kind of back panel here, this one here, it's going to make it shorter, but it's also going to make the other one longer, which we don't actually want in this particular case. But what we can do here is just within our 2D pattern window, first of all, delete the seam that is there and then afterward press X to add a few points here. So what I'm going to do, okay, I'm going to press Alt 4 to go within transparency mode, and I'm going to add a point that is somewhere around the same height as the back of the character. So here it should actually be a little bit lower than this. So I've added one point on one side here, on one panel. If I actually select the panel again and I click on Edit Styleline, I can actually see where the point is now. So that's really, really wonderful. If I press Alt 4 again, I can see transparency mode. And so I can see where this particular point has been added. And you can see it's been added pretty much at the exact height that it needs to be there. So now I can press X again, and I can add a point that will be symmetrical to that on the other garment, on the other panel. Unfortunately, this kind of always gets out of edit styleline mode here within our 3D window. So I'm just going to click on this again, click on where my point is, click on one panel just to see where the points are. It would be fun to always see where the points are actually within the 3D window and not have to constantly go back and forth within the styleline editing mode, right? That is right here. Fortunately, we don't have a feature that is at our disposal where we can always have the points to be visible, unfortunately. There's no options in here to do that. Showing topology doesn't do it. So yeah, unfortunately, there's no button that we can click on to always be able to see the points within our 3D window, unfortunately. But yet again, if we click on Edit Styleline, we can see where the points are. So the points that we have added here, this point here on the back panel is a little bit lower, but that's fine. That's, I think, within well within tolerance of what we want to do here. Of course, if we wanted to have this point be at the exact same height, we could always add, you know, if we just do it here just for the sake of it, okay? What I could always do here is just press M to add a free sewing line. On the first panel on which I have added my point, I can press M to go within free sewing, add a free sewing there that goes from the hem all the way to the point that I have added. And then afterward, complete this free sewing so that it is just like so that we have the same sewing length on both sides. Press B afterwards, select the seam that I have added, right click on it, and do an add point to pattern on end. So that this will give us the point that is exactly at the same height. But let's keep in mind we are trying to sketch out a garment right now, so we want to be moving fairly quickly. So whether you decide to do that or not, or just to kind of eyeball where the other point would be, as we have done before here, if I press X and add a point, should be somewhere around here or so. A little bit lower than that. It's okay if your points don't always 100% overlap. That is well within the margin. So that's okay, you know, choose whichever approach that you want. Anyway, so the other thing I want to do is to perhaps add a point where the garment here starts to become in contact with the back of the character, because the top of this particular seam is already where I want it to be. So I kind of want to add another point at about this height here. So yeah, right there. See where the garment starts to leave the back of the character and starts to float within the air. I want to add another point right here. And once again, we'll add it fairly symmetrically, just like so. I think I've gotten it exactly, actually, to match 100% in terms of height. So that's wonderful. This point is exactly where it needs to be. So this allows us to create what will be essentially a bit of a diamond cut through the garment, or what would otherwise be called a dart. And now we can use our Edit Styleline here button. Once again, select perhaps this particular panel that is right here. Select this particular garment, take this point here, move it inward, just like so. Take the point that is symmetrical to that, also move it inward so that we get something that is nice and symmetrical. I will actually select these curves and I will get rid of all of the curved points on those because I don't want this to curve. I actually want this to be nice and angular here. So let's select these. Let's right click on these edges and let's do a delete all curve points, just like that. Of course, if I simulate now, the garment's gonna come apart. But now we want to add the seams that we need to add to complete the connection between these panels in the back. So pressing N within our 3D window, let's do a seam that goes from here to here, a seam that goes from here to there, and finally a seam that goes from here to there. Let's simulate again, and there you go. So now this is getting nicely fitted. Let's still look at our strain map because it could be easy to kind of assume that this is fine. But if we have removed too much fabric using our dart, this will start to become a little bit tight on the back of the character. We don't want that. We don't want tightness in here. We still want this to be nicely fitted, but not necessarily stretched. And you can see there's a little bit of stretching going on here. So perhaps I can, once again, I won't be able to really do this using the edit styline here. So within our 2D window here, I'm going to press, let's press Z in fact now to go within edit pattern. I'm just going to take these points, I'm just going to move them inward just a little bit, just to reintroduce a little bit of fabric that we have removed using this dart here. And that's pretty good to me. And if we look at our arm side yet again, so from front view, this looks nice and straight. Perhaps this particular point here, the point of the shoulder, we could actually move it outward just a little bit more than this. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and click our edit styline button and take the point of the shoulder here and move it outward just a little bit. So there's a little bit more freedom perhaps to connect afterward the sleeve here and have this nice angular change happening to the silhouette. So that's pretty good. On the back, if I want to have a nice arm side that is nice and straight from the point of the shoulder all the way to this particular point here, let's use our edit styline, click on this particular point, move it inward just a little bit, just like that. And once again, as we do that, all the required changes happen to all of the connected panels, which is absolutely fantastic. I wouldn't mind to remove a little bit of this extra fabric that is here that is creating some of these folds. So let's go ahead and do that. Unfortunately, I don't think that the edit styline buttons will allow us to do this here. If I take the scale here and I do a scale, it's going to scale the whole arm side, which is not what we want. And so pretty much the only thing that we can do here, I suppose if we wanted to be fancy, we could press B, delete this particular seam, delete the seam that is here, use the scale styline, take this particular edge now, and since it is disconnected from the rest of the arm side, you can see that only this particular edge now, from the point of the shoulder all the way to the point here that we have on the back here, gets highlighted. So now I could actually scale this down if I wanted to. But this does introduce perhaps more clicks than what we would want. But it is a way to do it. Let's press N again, sew from here to here, and then sew from here to there. And there you go. That's already a little bit better. So we could do it like this, or we could, of course, simply use our standard editing tools within the 2D window. Take this particular point that is here, move it just a little bit further down. This also gives us, as you can see, an arm side that is a little bit nicer. Here I could use my edit styline here. So there's a little bit of a point here you can see on the back panel. Maybe I can actually get rid of that using the edit styline. Select the back panel here. Perhaps if I can move this curve here upward a little bit, just like that. You can see I can actually edit out a little bit of this point that was there. But of course, we can always go back to our 2D window as well. Press Z here within our 2D window. Select this particular curve here. Select the Bezier handles that are there. And just make sure that we have a nice round curve. So that works too, of course. So before we add the sleeves, I think it would be important to make sure that we remove as much as possible the stretching that we have everywhere over this particular garment. The more elements that we add to this particular garment, the more we'll have to deal with these kind of little stretching zones in different places. And it will make it harder and harder the more elements that we add to the garment to afterward get rid of these zones of stretching there, or at least to minimize them. So I really want to address these things before we go any further. We have a little bit of stretching here, and there's a little bit more here actually. So under the armpit right here, this gets kind of red orange-ish. So I kind of want to address that as well while we're there. For the front, maybe we'll do the same. I guess we'll see. And I would like to also reduce these kind of transverse sort of diagonal folds that she has over the side of her ribcage there, just to get something that is even more properly fitted so that this really starts to look like a coat as opposed to look like a shirt. So let's do that together. And once we've addressed that, then afterward we'll move into creating the sleeves there. Okay, so for this here, it's really just a question of how do we need to manipulate these different patterns to add just a little bit of looseness or to remove a little bit of looseness in different places until we get something that is fitting just right for the character there. So in this particular case, we have a lot of stretching here. Vertically speaking, I don't think there's anything wrong here, but the piece that's right here, I think this particular piece here definitely needs to be widened somehow a little bit so that there's just a little bit more space for the scapulas there. And also, of course, this particular character, um, her thoracic cage is obviously a little bit wider than her waist is. So obviously, we want the garment to also reflect that. We want the garment to be a little bit wider towards the top and to become narrower as we go towards the waist area, which is, of course, why we have added those diamond cuts in the back. But it would be useful to maybe also see if we can get the same thing going on to the side of the character there. And perhaps over the front too, although I think the front should probably stay actually as a bit of a line here. Um, but certainly for the side here, it would be very beneficial to also have a little bit of a diamond cut that is running through the side seam there that is kind of built in there so that we also remove a little bit of that fabric that is on the side of the thoracic cage there. Okay, so that's a lot of little changes that need to be done, but essentially we'll do the same thing as we have done before. We'll just add points, start to just shape this particular garment panel here in a way that's a little bit different. In terms of height, we can probably match the same height as the point that we have created on the other side. So let's see where this actually winds up here. So yeah, that's pretty good. Actually, a little bit lower wouldn't be a bad idea now that I look at it. So maybe about here or so. Yeah, that's pretty good where this particular point is. We can do the same thing. We could add a point here that is symmetrical in whichever way that we want to, of course, as we have talked about before. But considering the fact that these two segments have the exact same length, I can just press X here, add a point to the other side, and there you go. They are overlapping. Don't need to try to calculate that in ways a little bit more fanciful than that. Okay, so what we essentially want to do is to here I will actually just delete the curve points from these segments to make sure that these are kind of nice and angular. And here, so we want to, once again, these aren't the kind of changes we can do with the style line because these are sewed together. So if I move one of these points using the style line, it's going to stretch the other panel, which is not what I want to do here. So I need to do these changes within the 2D pattern window. Let's take this point then. So I've pressed Z here to go within edit pattern. Let's take this point, move it inward a little bit, move this one here inward a little bit, and then we'll take these points here, at least this one here, on the other side. Yeah, it could be useful to do it on the other side as well. Let's make these wider, in fact, so that we build in a little bit more width around the thoracic cage so that she has a little bit more of a breathing room in there, quite literally there. There we go, just like that. One thing I could do, if I don't actually want to disturb this particular curve that's here, one thing I could do maybe is just press X, add one point here, because you can see when I take this point and I move it further towards the left, right? I'm actually kind of disturbing this particular curve that is there, and I don't actually want to do that. So, a few things I could do maybe is maybe take this particular edge, do an offset pattern outline, kind of push this out just like this, grab this particular point, move it towards the left. Or what I could do is also just press X, add a point here, which will allow me afterward to grab this point and move it. And now I can extend, as you can see, the edge here, the segment, the edge of the panel without actually destroying this particular curve that is here. So this allows me to build in just a little bit more of that, just a little bit more fabric here. And then after this point, actually, I kind of want to move it down a little bit. And I want to move it down here actually because just a little bit like this here, because I actually want to keep this particular corner here at 90 degrees. That's quite important to me because I want both panels here. Like this should be a right angle seam and both panels that meet here. So both this panel and this panel here should both meet at 90 degrees, if that makes any sense there. So that's also one thing that I want to pay attention to here. I probably really don't have to put in a lot of fabric here, so maybe even just make this here a little bit smaller here. I really don't think that a lot of fabric is necessary. I think a little bit will go a long way. Yeah, I mean, I could do the same thing. Choose your approach that you want. I guess here I'll just select this particular edge here and do a offset pattern outline on this one. And then this vertex here, I'll just delete it really, so that we wind up having a triangle of fabric that we have just added here. And so same thing, let's move this one here a little bit inward. And yeah, so let's resimulate and see what happens. All right. If I look at our stretch map, we've gotten rid of all of the stretching that was here. And there's actually a little bit less of these folds here, but we could maybe even push this a little bit further. Let's see how far we can actually push this. So if I take these points here, move this one here a little bit further inward yet again, simulate again. And see, as I'm doing this, it's making this particular panel tighter and tighter to the body. Yeah, okay, so about these points that are here, as I said, I want to keep them at 90 degrees. So I actually want to take this particular point here, move it down a little bit so that I wind up having something here that is at 90 degrees. This side, on this side too, extreme precision is not necessary. But as you can see, when you look within the 3D pattern window, this is actually kind of what we're expecting, right? We're expecting both segments. So these two panels, we're expecting the two segments here that create the arm side to meet in the middle. And to create this nice 90 degrees seam in between those. And we want the line that continues from one panel to the other one to be nice and straight. So that's pretty good. And then I suppose we could take these points here and convert them to curve points. It's gonna get us rid of the Bezier curves that are there if we do that, but that's okay with me. We don't need to necessarily keep these as Bezier curves. So very tiny change there, not all that necessary. Anyway, okay, so that's pretty good. Okay, so this is more better fitted to the character there. I think I want to get rid of this here. And also the back here, the back seam, you can see it's kind of sticking out a little bit. Has a bit of a weird kind of curve to it that right now I don't actually like. So let's get rid of this here. Let's try to get this particular line to be a little bit closer to the body. And then afterward, let's get rid of this here, this little fold that's here. And we'll be good to add the sleeves afterward. Let's actually start with this. We did some work on this previously, but I'm not all that happy with it. I really think this could be better there. Truth be told, this probably doesn't need that much of a change. It's just the, put these two patterns right next to each other here. We do get a nice continuous curve, which I do like. But I think this could probably do something like this here. Press X here, add 1 point here, add 1 point there, take this vertex here, delete it, and maybe do the same thing here. So I'm doing this, once again, instead of taking these points and moving them manually, because as I'm doing that, I am changing the whole curve, which I don't want to do. I want to preserve as much of the curve that is there as I can, but I just want to remove a little bit of a little bit of a triangle like this. And yeah, see, that gives me something that's pretty good here. We could try to edit this further, of course, try to make this even smaller. Maybe remove a little bit of the fabric here, a little bit of the fabric there. But I'm fine with that. That's within tolerance as far as I'm concerned. So happy with this. I suppose once again here, we can convert these to curve points, just like so. Okay, very happy with that. So for this here, so what's going on there? So we have this kind of unsightly fold that is created here. And some of that probably comes from the fact that this, like if we look at this curve here within our 2D pattern window, it doesn't quite match what we are kind of getting here. So my feeling is that this curve here right now, well, it just doesn't have the right curve, for lack of a better term. The fact that it kind of has a very different shape in 3D here. The fact that we're getting a little bit of extra fabric here means that there's probably a little bit of fabric that needs to be removed here. So there's that. I also wonder if we should move the princess seam further towards the outside so that the side panel has a little bit less of a, I suppose, a 3D-ness to it, right? Because right now it is pushing up against, or rather the breasts are pushing up against it, which means that it is kind of creating a area of tension here. And from that, we are getting these radially emanating folds out of that. So, by the way, we do have a class on fold anatomy on the website. So I do recommend that you watch that if the term area of tension is not quite clear for you what that actually means there. So I think, yeah, I don't think it would be a bad idea to take this princess seam and move it towards the outside, actually. So let's actually do that here. So with our edit style line there, then let's take this princess seam, and let's just move it towards the outside. And if I look to maybe make this seam as straight as I can, I could actually get rid of a little bit of the curve that's happening towards the top there. So with our edit styleline function then, let's select this particular point and let's try to move it towards the outside. Although if I do that, you can see that it's editing the whole princess seam, which may not be that good of an idea. So once again, let's press X within our 2D pattern window, add 2 points here, which allows me afterward to grab this particular vertex, move it out, and I am only changing the top of the princess seam. There you go, nice and straight. That looks pretty good. And all the changes, all the required changes have been done to all of the panels after that, right? If I take this one here and I rotate it, it's not a bad idea sometimes just to check your seam lengths like these, just to put two panels that are joined together side by side and simply eyeball to see whether you have the same length for your different segments. Of course, you could also look at the measurements. You could press Shift Z to look at the measurements. Clearly, this one here is 5.45. This one is 5.19. But sometimes just eyeballing it, I kind of like to do that too. So anyway, let's try to make these segments to be the same length as much as possible. So that's pretty good here. 4.63, 4.63. That's perfect. All right, so our princess seam is a little bit straighter. I think we could probably, yeah, I think there's a way to actually get rid of the tension that is here around the collar. That's probably coming from the fact that the opening to the collar, this here, so these segments here is actually a little bit too tight for her. So perhaps trying to introduce a little bit more fabric in there would allow us to get a collar that's a little bit better fitted here. So once again, I'm going to use the technique of adding a point and then selecting afterward the vertex that is that I want to extend and just move it outward a little bit, just like that. And also, as I do it, I can't just move it like that here because, once again, I want to keep these at 90 degrees. These seams, I want them to be at 90 degrees versus the edge of the garment. So as I take this out, I also have to kind of move it in a direction that will always keep this particular corner at 90 degrees as much as possible. And let's do the same on the other side. Resimulate again. See, I have gotten rid of some of that tension that was there. Also, let me check the collision distance on the avatar because this might be using the default values of 3 millimeters, which is a little bit too high for me. So let's just select the avatar, go within our properties. So hotkey list, we can get rid of that. We're not using that now. So let's go within property editor. And let's check the collision distance on this, which is, or rather the skin offset, as you can see, which is set to 3 millimeters right now. A little bit too high for me. I like to keep this at 1 so that the garment floats a little bit less on top of the carrot there. And yeah, so that also allows us to get a collar that fits better by virtue of there being less of distance between the avatar and the actual garment. So now we just have to get rid of this kind of little bump here that we have. That's not all that great to look at there. So let's take this particular point, convert it to curve point, and then let's press V to go within curve point edit mode. And let's take the curve points that have been added. So we had Bezier curves. The Bezier curves have been converted to curve points. Let me take now these curve points and just take this particular point, move it inward a little bit, just like that. That's just going to allow me just to keep a nicer curve here that doesn't have that little bump that we had there. This particular point here, I think we can just convert it to curve point, and that's probably going to be all that we need here. Yeah, that's pretty good. Back to this then. What can we do with this particular fold that is here? So that's like, of course, adding a dart here would allow us to get rid of some of this fabric. I'm not sure I want to add a dart there. This particular princess seam, we could actually, as opposed to have it go all the way up the shoulder, we could take the princess seam and could actually rotate it so that it goes, as opposed to go all the way up the shoulder, we could rotate it so that it goes right here. So have a princess seam that's kind of a bit of at an angle there, which will actually kind of mimic what's happening on the back, but will be lower on the character. That would be a way to get rid of a little bit of the fabric, because having the seam here would allow us to just tweak a little bit the sides, the segments that create the seam itself, so that we could get rid of a little bit of the fabric here. It's not that bad of an idea. Ultimately, too, I want to add more seam to this in different places because I want to make this a coat that has some nice, interesting seams that are kind of designed in an interesting way. So I'm not against the idea of adding an extra seam there. That might be all that we can do really about this. Okay, let's go ahead and draw a styline here. Kill the simulation, draw a styline. Let's draw a styline that goes from right here all the way there. This cuts through our pattern. And in turn there, then I can perhaps add a point here, add a point there. Take these two vertices, delete them. The consequence of which, as you can see, is that now we have removed, in a very targeted way, a little bit of fabric from the side panels here for the torso. So we now have this extra seam, and the question is, do we want to keep it now or not? Which is an interesting one. Well, I mean, I definitely want to keep that. The question is, do I want to keep the rest of the princess seam then? That's the interesting question. It might not be necessary to keep the princess seam. I mean, once again, we can keep it just for design purposes. We don't, like, if we want to, if we're worrying about creating a design that we like, we can keep it, of course. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no wrong answer here as to whether we want to keep it or not. I think I want to get rid of it now, just to have a base that is as simple as I can before we start to add cuts for the express purpose of design. I think right now I actually want to get a simple garment that fits the best that it can fit. So I kind of like the idea of getting rid of the princess seam, or rather this particular seam that is over the kind of goes over the pectoralis, the clavicle, and up to the shoulder there. I like the idea of getting rid of it for now. Ultimately, we might actually want to add it back just for design purposes. But right now, I'm not actually sure design-wise where I want to go with this, right? So actually, I kind of like the idea of just having something that fits very nicely, is nicely fitted first as a base, get rid of all the kind of fitting issues that we have, and then afterward to talk about how do we design something that's kind of cool with this. So let's go ahead and take this particular seam. Let's do a merge on this. By the way, for some reason, I did not have linked editing anymore. Marvelous Designer is like, nope, I'm not doing this with linked editing. Okay, let me just take this here, just rotate it back so that it's nice and centered. Take the middle line here. Let's do a cut and sew. Let's take both panels, left and right one. Let's do apply linked editing, symmetric pattern with sewing, which more or less gets us to the exact same place in the sense that these are now symmetrical. The changes that we do to one panel will be carried symmetrically across, but we don't have that symmetry line anymore, which in this case might actually allow us to merge this. Yeah, there you go, on both sides with only one operation. Simulate here yet again. And yeah, as you can see, it hasn't changed anything as far as the fit is concerned. And then finally, I suppose we can take these points here. These don't have to stay as angular points. So if we convert them to curve points, let's see what happens. Yeah, it's pretty good. I think that's going to work nicely. So I kind of like it. Starting to feel like as if the side seam here should be a little bit further so that we get a roundness here that is more and more symmetrical. So let's go ahead and take this point here, move it towards the back here using our edit styleline function. Resimulate here. Yeah, it's getting pretty good. A little bit more, and then a little bit further down. Let's try to tweak this curve here. There you go, nice and round. Very happy with this. I think this will give us very, very nice sleeves. Yeah, cool. Super happy with this. You can see now the middle here, it's kind of sticking out here in a way that's kind of ugly. So I can try to address that. So these are the symmetry line that we have here. So there too, same thing. I could probably add one point here. Take this point afterward, delete it, resimulate. Make sure my seam goes from point to point, of course. And there you go. That's nice and flat now. And overall, we're getting an arm side that very nicely, perfectly goes all the way around the arm. So I'm very, very happy with that. Like, it could be tempting to get the arm side even closer to the armpit, but once again, if we do that, I think it's going to make a garment that's probably going to be very uncomfortable to wear. So I would actually rather keep that a little bit. I think I don't want to get rid of that completely. Let me see if there's a way to introduce a little bit more looseness towards the back, actually. So this particular style line, this particular line here, I just curve it just like that a little bit. There you go. It's a little bit more freedom of movement here as well. Once again, we have a little bit of stretching here. We had gotten rid of some of it, but clearly there's still some stretching here. So this is on the back panel. And then, as we said, we also want to flatten out this particular seam here. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's take this particular pattern here. Let's press Shift Z, get rid of the measurements here, and re-rotate this so that it's nice and vertical within our 2D pattern window. And so what we want then is, first of all, there's a very gentle curve here. Let me get rid of it. So select this particular segment here, right click on it, do a delete all curve points, which has, as you can see now, flattens out this seam. And we need to add a little bit more horizontal fabric here so that there's a little bit more breathing space in there. So I can perhaps take this point here, move it just like so, add a little bit more width to this. And I think this seam might actually be a little bit too high now. It might have shifted a little bit there. This particular point here, I really want it to be more or less at the midpoint of the shoulder from the back. So right now it's a little bit too high. Let's do edit style line, take it, move it downward a little bit. Perhaps adjust this curve in the process. Simulate again. Yeah, now it's placed where I want it to be placed. So the changes I've done has actually crashed Marvelous Designer, but thankfully I had saved this very, very recently, so I really haven't lost that much work here. But let's see where things are now if we simulate the garment here. Yeah, so, well, I mean, we can see overall the fit is really, really good, right? The only thing that we really need to get rid of then is just to flatten this particular seam out there. So, yeah, I'm not sure exactly how much work I've lost, but it doesn't seem to be that much here. But one thing I want to do is just to tweak, just get these curves to look better. I'm kind of tempted. This might be dangerous, but I will do it regardless. Let me actually just, I could press V here and just edit these curve points and get the curve that I want. Or one thing I can do, and once again, I think it's kind of dangerous to do it, but let's just try it. See what happens. Take these two segments, delete their curve points entirely, which will make these kind of completely straight. As long as Marvelous Designer does not crash in the process, of course. Delete all curve points. Here we go. And then see if I press C. See if I press C, just to take these curves afterward. Let me also perhaps convert these to curve points here. So press C, take this particular curve, and try to recreate the curve here using only what will be Bezier handles, which just gives me a nicer curve overall. Yeah, that's pretty good. See, I kind of like that. And the extra fabric that we have here comes from this kind of angular point that we have. So let's try to get rid of that here. Let me add 2 points here. Take these afterward, convert them to curve points. Take all the curve points here, delete them. In fact, I kind of want to convert this to curve point 2. Get rid of these curve points just to have a nice straight line like this. And then hopefully I can do the same thing on both sides. Trying to get a little bit of folds like these, and I think this comes from probably seams that are too long on both sides. Yeah, and if I take a look at this seam here, there's a 2 centimeter difference there. So that's not great, which means that we want to perhaps remove about 2 centimeters right here. It feels like a very big change, but let's see where it leads us. And what about these seam here? So these seam here, almost the same length. Okay, let me get rid of all these seams here. Actually, these seam here, I want to keep them from point to point. I don't want to change that here. But so now, if I, let's say, do a M-to-N segment sewing, so Shift-N, M-to-N segment sewing here, press enter, press on the other side, press enter. This gives us the best possible distribution for these seams. So now the seam difference actually is negligible. So to get rid of this here, which is pretty much the last thing I need to do to get this to fit otherwise perfectly, we could take a look at the collar here once again. I know we're starting to get bogged down into fitting, which I kind of didn't want to do necessarily, but I think that this is useful. So let's actually continue. Okay, so essentially the fact we have few folds here for me does suggest that we don't have the fit that we need, and probably comes from the fact that these, if we take a look at these here, right? So these, and if I activate transparency here, which I actually forget the shortcut of, and if there even is one within the 2D pattern window here. So if I do translucent surface, we can see that these two curves really don't match all that great. So this curve here is probably a little bit too generous. Let's reduce it here. All the while, I want to take a look at our segment lengths or our sewing lengths, make sure that they are always as close as they can be of the same length on both sides. Every time that we get a bunch of folds somewhere like these, it means that there is too much fabric perpendicular to the fold. We can see that this seam here, we have a length that is different on both sides, and the seam that is on the back panel has 1.5 centimeter too much there. So yeah, one thing I could maybe do, okay, maybe just add an internal line here, just like so. Cut through the back panel, take the seam afterward, do a cut and sew on it, which allows me to independently tweak the top portion from the bottom portion. And what I'm thinking is that maybe I can actually shorten this up here by about a centimeter or so near the bottom. All right, so now this is starting to look nice and flat here. So these two pieces are now meeting in a way that's very, very nice. And hell, let's do the same. This particular panel here, do a cut and sew, just like so. Resimulate it. So get these to match as well as we can get them to match. You can see what we're kind of doing is almost building these geometric kind of like almost hard shapes, you know? It's kind of what we're doing just to get it to be fitting as well as possible. The reason why I'm still tweaking this because I kind of want to get rid of these folds that are here. So the fit is not perfect yet. And this is something I have tendency to do, by the way, just get completely bogged down within these kind of things. A little bit more than what becomes useful at some point. But I appreciate the challenge. But again, this is within tolerance. I don't think anyone would actually look at this and say, "Oh, like you haven't done a proper fitting job there. Yeah. You need to go back and tweak your stuff." Okay, so let's keep it here. I think this is within tolerance. Okay, all right. I'm not sure I need to necessarily keep these as seams, so let me go ahead and remerge these together. Let's do a merge here. Let's do a merge there. And as I resimulate, you can see now how everything is kind of becoming nicer and perhaps curvier there. So very, very happy with that. Um, should we bother with this? That's the question. This is can be a little bit obsessive about these things, uh, but I think this is well within tolerance. So let's keep it like this. Okay. Very happy with this overall. And as we said, maybe you want to revisit the collar here quickly. Yeah, look at that. Getting very happy with this. Getting a nice straight line here for the back of the collar. We've gotten rid of the tension that was here. Okay. It's not worth to spend more time on this. The overall fit is very, very good. We really don't have that many folds that really don't belong there. Um, and it's just a little bit of looseness, different places like around the collar, but that's fine. That's all within um, That's all. That's all very acceptable there. I have gone further than this and what I actually intended to originally, but that's just my obsessive nature to do that, and probably also further than you probably need if you're just trying to like sketch out a garment with this. Um, but you can see how far you can go trying to make something that is nicely fitted. Of course, if you're making a shirt that's supposed to look a little bit loose, you know, like you're making, I don't know, like a comfortable, cozy shirt that you want a character to wear. If you're making a T-shirt, these sorts of things, you don't have to go to this degree of detail. Of course, this is always based upon what is the intention. How do we want the final garment to look like? So I will admit I've gone too far with this. Okay, in the context of a class. And I don't want to spook you into thinking that somehow every pattern that you need, that you do, needs to be fitted as perfectly as this, because once again, this is just my nature to do that. I just like to make clothes that are nicely fitted. But of course, if you just look around you, if you look at the clothes that you wear yourself, it's very likely that most clothes that you wear aren't fitted to this degree of perfection there, right? And we kind of like to have clothes that are a little bit baggy. So don't go as crazy as this if you don't want to. Okay, we could have stopped fitting this a while ago, and we could have moved on to the sleeves. This is, as I said, just my own nature, and I feel kind of bad even having to apologize in the middle of the class. But damn it, I had some fun doing it, and I think that the result is great. So I'm not going to apologize too much. Let's move on to the sleeves then. So for the sleeves, what we're going to do is that we're going to build a rectangle that has the dimensions that we expect to have for the sleeve. And then we'll place that sleeve on the avatar using what we call arrangement points. And then after that, we'll tweak the segment of the sleeve that will connect to the arm side until the shape is as close as it can to the shape of the arm side. And then we will sew it all together. So the first thing that I need for my sleeves is to figure out how wide of a sleeve I even need to begin with. So we essentially want a sleeve that will connect all the way around the arm side that we already have here on the torso. So the best thing that we can do really is just to measure how wide of a panel of fabric that we need to be able to wrap around the arm and connect to the arm side directly. So what I'm going to do here, I'm simply going to press Z within our 2D pattern window, and we are going to select all of the segments that comprise the arm's eye. So this one here, this one, and this one. And we can see here that the length of all of these is 32.76 centimeters. So that's how wide of a panel that I need to be able to create the sleeves, or at least to create the part of the sleeve that will be connected to the torso right here. In terms of length, we could actually measure the whole length of the arm if we wanted to. We could be very, very precise by using the measurements that we have here. We could use a linear measure here, and we could say, okay, like how wide or how long of a sleeve do we need? And well, we can see what the answer is here. It's about 52 centimeters. But that's okay if we just eyeball that too as well. I think the most important thing is just to get the proper width of fabric so that we have a sleeve that nicely connects to the rest of the torso there. But in terms of length, we can easily adjust that later. So once again, here we need a sleeve that will be 32.76 centimeters wide as a panel of fabric that will go all the way around the arm. So let's press S then to go within rectangle creation mode. And let's just create that here. So of course, I could obviously just click here within our 2D pattern window, and then I could input the actual measures that are here, or we can just eyeball it and get just tweak the rectangle of fabric afterward until it is the proper dimensions there. But since I've already clicked, and so why not go for the exact measurements here? So we said here 32.76. That's for the width, or in this case here, that would be, yeah, I guess that would be the width from the horizontal axis, although we will flip this 90 degrees. And then in terms of height here, we're talking about 52 centimeters. So by doing this here, I can have the exact panel that I needed in terms of size. And then afterward here, I can just press A, take this particular panel, hold Shift while I click on this little handle here to rotate this so that it snaps here at 90 degrees on the side. So obviously this is one way that we can do it, but the way that I wanted to do it originally was just to press S, create a rectangle here, and then afterward press Shift Z so that I can see within my 2D pattern window what is the dimensions of things. And then afterwards press A, select the panel here, and then just play around here with the size here, just manually scale it up as you can see. So all these ways work really to create these different panels depending on how exact you want to be here. Just that sometimes I like I just like to tweak things directly instead of inputting actual exact measurements. But it doesn't really matter. You can create this in whichever way that you want, really. And then here, so we're talking about 50 centimeters or so for the length of the sleeve. So there you go. That's our rectangle of fabric there. And then we will attach this to the arrangement points on the avatar. Now, if you haven't seen the other classes on Marvelous Designer that we have on the website, the concept of an arrangement point might be new to you. And arrangement points are simply helper points, if you will, that are created around any particular avatar that you have within Marvelous Designer to help you place garment panels easier there, and especially to wrap those particular garment panels around the silhouette of the body that you are working around there. So to show the arrangement points on an avatar, then you can press Shift F to expose them. And these are all these blue dots that you see within our 3D pattern window are all of the arrangement points that we have. So with this particular rectangle of fabric that is selected, I will then simply click on the arrangement point that is right here. So deep within the elbow, I will click on the one that is right here. And what that's going to do is that it will simply snap and also, as you can see, kind of roll around this particular panel of fabric around the particular arm that we have here. It just so happens, though, that this has been rotated 90 degrees because as you can see right now, we definitely don't have the proper length here for the sleeve. So this panel has actually been rotated in an orientation that is not what we want it to be. So here on the right, within our hotkey list, here I'll just switch this back over to the properties editor. And with this panel of fabric that is still selected, we can scroll down here and go where it says arrangement point right here. And in there, you can see what is the arrangement point that we have clicked on. So on which arrangement point is this particular panel of fabric connected to? And where it says here position X, Y, we can actually play around with the position, as you can see. And this kind of rotates here the panel of fabric around the arm. This one here will move it up and down. And the orientation in this particular case is the one that I want here. So it says 180 degrees. Let me just set this to 90 degrees, which will actually rotate. In fact, if I actually play around with this, you can see what actually happens there. So it's just rotating around the panel here. And so 90 degrees is what we want here. And finally, the offset that we have is kind of like how offsetted off of the body it is. So it is effectively pushing the panel of fabric further and further away from the body or closer to the body, depending on the value that we input in here. So this feels overly tight. I'm even wondering if I haven't forgotten one of the measurements here that we had. So we were talking here about 32 centimeters. This does seem overly tight now that I look at it, although this offset could be a little bit higher perhaps. And let me play with the position Y actually, just to slide this down the arm a little bit there. But yeah, this seems overly tight as a sleeve, right? If we compare it to the size of the arm side, which kind of makes me wonder if I haven't actually forgotten a measurement somewhere, or if I have not measured things properly here. So let me actually just check here the size here. So 12 centimeters for this particular segment. This one here is about 8 centimeters or so. This one is 13. And finally, just this one here that we need. So that's 32 centimeters yet again. So that should be correct, even though that kind of looks a little bit tight when we look at the sleeve here. But let's just continue to work on this, and then we'll see if there's anything that I am doing here that is extremely wrong and kind of guiding us off track here. But I don't think so. I mean, I am trusting the measurements that I'm seeing here, and this tells me that this should be 32 centimeters. So let's just roll with this and see where this actually takes us. So the next thing that I want to do is to, before we do actually add any kind of seam to connect the sleeve to the rest of the body, let me also just press Shift F here to get out of arrangement point mode here. The other thing that I want to do is just to match here the actual shape of the sleeves here, because you can sort of imagine if I actually attach the sleeve that I have here to the torso, this will start to stretch in all sorts of very ugly ways. So that isn't very good right now. So we want to just tweak the shape here of this particular segment that is right here until it actually has a shape that gets as close as possible to the body shape. So to do that, a few things I'm going to do here. First of all, we're going to freeze every panel that we have within the scene other than for the sleeves so that they don't actually shift around or continue to simulate there. So while I'm selecting all the panels here that we have within our 2D pattern window, and let me just press Shift Z to disable the measurements, we're going to press Control K afterward just to freeze everything. And so this makes it so that whatever happens when I simulate here, no matter what happens to the sleeves, you'll see that the panels of cloth that are over the torso will never move. So that's what freezing does here. And not only will I do that, okay, but I will also disable the gravity within the scene so that when I do simulate, the sleeve does not actually fall down the arm the way that it is doing it right now. So this will allow me just to tweak the shape of the sleeve and kind of resimulate it and tweak it until we get as close as we can get to the shape of the arm side here without having to deal with the sleeve continuously falling down the character there. So to disable the gravity, pretty simple. On the top right here within this little box that is right here, we'll click on the little drop-down menu that is right here. So right now this is set to fabric. And we'll just, from the drop-down menu here, we'll simply select the scene browser. Now, there might be a better way to do this now within Marvelous Designer. I'm not actually sure, but this is the way that I have always done it to disable the gravity within the scene. So go to the scene browser and then scroll down where it says environment here. And within simulation properties, just click on that. And where it says gravity afterward here at minus 9800, let's just set that here to 0. And that will effectively disable the gravity in the scene, meaning that when I do simulate here once again, you can see that my sleeve now is kind of floating as if it was in space. Of course, it is opening itself because it tries to go back to its original 2D arrangement there. It does not keep the actual curvature that was that is the result of the arrangement point. But to make sure that we deal with that, of course, we can just seam here the underside of the sleeve. One thing we haven't really talked about But in this particular case, this particular seam is placed where I want it to be, of course. But if I actually select the panel again, since we have played with the offset, we've played with the orientation of this particular panel. If we play here with the position X, you'll see that we can actually rotate the panel around. So we could actually place the seam wherever we want. If we want to have a back seam on the sleeve as opposed to an underside seam, I can do that easily by just playing around with the position X there. But regardless, I actually wanted to keep the seam right under the arm. So I'm just going to rotate it here once again and keep the seam right here. Ideally too, it's very common, I think, for jackets to see the side seam that we have on the torso and the seam of the sleeve to be both at the exact same height. So we might have to actually move this seam a little bit further back. So we might have to do that, but for now, let's just continue with this and we'll see where this takes us and if that becomes necessary later on or not. Okay, so let's create our seam here once again. And I'm not sure that's proper here. Oh yeah, here we go, just like that. The consequence of which, and because I have disabled the gravity within the scene, when I do simulate, you can see that my sleeve will nicely close itself, but it's not going to actually move. It's not going to slide down the arm. So it makes tweaking its shape here a lot better there. And I'm still concerned, by the way, about these particular dimensions. I still feel as if there's something going on here that needs to be addressed. And so troubleshooting 101, because there is definitely here something that does not make sense to me. And it's good that we're actually encountering this in the context of a class, because then we can actually talk about how to solve this here. We look at the garment right now and the stretch map, and there really doesn't seem to be that much stretching going on, but there's a little bit of stretching, okay? Like we can see, because this is actually blue as opposed to be completely white, the way that we actually have it on the sleeve right now. Like, in fact, we don't even have any stretching on the sleeve here at all. You can see when I actually move the sleeve around, the kind of stretch overlay seems to appear a little bit and then disappear. So there's no stretching on the arm right now, but there's actually a little bit of stretching going on over the garment. In fact, there is so much stretching in here we can, if we kind of match the color here, so this kind of blue sort of cyan color that kind of goes here towards the green a little bit, actually gives us here a stretching of about 105 to 108, which I know it's kind of hard to see. Maybe if I move this particular graphic here over the torso, you can actually see these values here a little bit better. So 105, 108. So there actually is a little bit of stretching in here. It's just that it's so low that it doesn't seem to be much of a problem. But now that we're actually trying to add the sleeve and connect the sleeve to it, I think that this actually becomes very, very obvious that there is something here that is going on. In fact, if I select these particular panels here, I think this might be new. I'm not used to seeing the actual stretch amount kind of appear on top of a selected panel, but that's what we have here. So we can see that all these are actually stretched a little bit here. So 104%, 104, 102. In fact, where I'm clicking here seems to actually change. So wherever I'm clicking here actually seems to tell us what is the stretching amount at that particular zone here. You can see here around the armpit, in fact, we have about 107% stretching. That's a lot, okay? Like I would not expect there to be any kind of stretching. So I think that perhaps this is my own newbie mistake that I'm doing right now, okay? But it's actually very, very bad to have stretching like this that is built into the garment there. So of course, we always want to think about what kind of material this is supposed to be. So, you know, like right now, this particular shirt slash coat garment that we are building would look great if this was, let's say, some type of active wear, you know, like something that has a little bit of spandex in there, like some type of exercise gym clothes that you kind of expect to have some stretching that is kind of built in there. This would look great for that here. And in that context, this is great. You know, if that's what we are building, this is great. But because we're actually building a coat here made out of, I haven't really made a choice because we're just kind of freestyling this, of course. I haven't really made a choice as to what kind of material this will be, but I don't expect it to be a material that stretches that much. Meaning that if we wind up doing, let's say, a leather coat, leather doesn't, I mean, leather does stretch, of course, with time. If you wear leather and you continuously wear it in a way that it is tight somehow, it will definitely stretch with time, but it doesn't stretch that much, right? It's not like a pair of spandex tank top or shorts or something that you kind of expect to really, really stretch quite a lot when you wear it, right? So leather stretches with time, but you don't necessarily expect it to stretch when you put it on necessarily. And same thing with anything that is kind of made with perhaps more natural fibers like cotton, flax, wool. I mean, wool can stretch, and so can cotton, of course, depending on the type of weave that is there. So anything that is knit will typically stretch, even if the basic material itself, such as cotton, does not stretch itself. The way that something is knit does impart some type of stretchiness to the fabric. I'm going deep down the rabbit hole here with you, but I think it's good to think about these things, okay? Like, I think that's the moral of the story here. But anyway, most outer shells that we could wear, coats, are not typically stretchy. And that's kind of what I want to be going for with this particular character, actually. So I haven't made a choice as to what is the material, but I have made a choice that this should not be a stretchy material. Which means that actually, like as nicely as this fits right now, and I will fully admit that part of why this fits so well right now is my own perhaps obsessive nature when it comes to creating nicely fitted clothes. But this is perhaps an example of me actually pushing things a little bit too far to the point that now this is actually not proper for the type of garment that I want to build there. And so we actually have to solve this. We'll have to solve this before we connect the sleeve, because the sleeve right now will essentially have the same thing will happen to the sleeve as what is happening on the torso there. We'll have a little bit of stretching that is kind of happening within the sleeves. If I was to connect the sleeves to the body right now, it would not look all that good. And this is not appropriate for the type of fabric and the type of garment that I want to build. So we have to fix that. Another thing, okay, if we want to really kind of make sure that we know exactly how wide the arm size should be, but also have it to be still in contact with the body, but not necessarily be stretched by the body. Another thing that we could do, of course, is just to measure what is the circumference here around the shoulder there, just to know what kind of value we should be expecting for the opening to the arm side without having any kind of stretching happening there. So the way that we can do that is using those particular measures that I've been talking about here. I believe a surface tape measure is probably the one that we want to use. So let's go ahead and use that here. What this allows us to do is just to, as you can see, just do a series of points that goes all the way around the avatar, which allows us to see what is the measurement there for any particular circumference or distance or shape that we could want to try and measure there. So I'm just going to go all the way around the arm. And let's connect this to the beginning. And so the measurement there for this particular measurement that I have created using the surface tape measure actually gives us a size here of 43.7 centimeters, whereas our garment, as we have talked about, actually has right now about 32 centimeters right now. So there's actually quite a lot of stretching that is built in there. I'm not sure what's the difference between 32 to 43. That's somewhere about the order of what, 25%, maybe even 30%, which is actually quite a lot of stretching when you actually really think about it, right? Point being that if I want my sleeve to connect where this particular measurement is, and we do not want to have any kind of stretching in there by default, or just a very, very minimal amount of it, then it means that my sleeve needs to be about 43 centimeters, first of all. And second of all, it means that the rest of my garment also has to be about 43 centimeters if we select all of these edges here that go all the way around the arm side. Actually, which is what I have right now. Okay, another curveball. I'm so confused. I mean, so everything I've said so far, I think, is an interesting way to troubleshoot things. But I am so confused because now I'm actually getting a measurement here of 45 centimeters when I select all of these, which again makes sense to me because 32 centimeters, if we needed for it to be around 45, would be a amount of stretching that was about 30%, which is not equal to what we were actually getting there. If we actually when we were looking at our stretch map here. So we get here a stretching of about 4% here, right? So from 32 to 43, that would be somewhere about 30% or so. And so that did not make any sense to me. And so actually, when I take these measurements again, yes, there's actually a bug within Marvelous Designer. Depending on which of these seams I'm actually clicking on somehow, or some of these edges I'm actually clicking on. I don't understand why, but now we're actually getting with the exact same edges that are selected here, the exact same segments. Now we're getting 45. This is also much closer to the measurement that we have simply added to the avatar there. Um, yeah, I think this has to be a bug of Mars Designer. The fact that it was giving us 32 centimeters before, and I've actually just checked the recording that I have just done here to make sure that I did indeed have the proper ones selected, the proper segment selected, and I did, and it gave us a measurement of 32 centimeters. If you remember previously, this is typically the kind of thing that would actually cut out of the video, and I would just restart. But we've talked about troubleshooting, I think, in a way that is kind of interesting. So I will actually keep this within the class, simply because now you know where to find the measurements and how to go about actually measuring things very precisely if you want to know what is the circumference of a particular place on the body and you want to create something that nicely fits there. Anyway, so we're keeping all of that. But what I have said about minimizing the stretching is very true. I actually don't want to have any stretching on this particular garment there, which means that, yes, I do need to address this regardless. Okay, first of all, this sleeve should be 45 centimeters. So first of all, that we know is definitely true. So I could actually go ahead here, take my rectangle, make it about 45 centimeters tall, about this here. And actually, if I just play around just for the sake of it, with the arrangement points, let me actually resimulate. We still have the gravity here that has been turned off within the scene. And actually, I'll just do Control F just to reset the 3D arrangement of this particular piece of fabric. And then let's play around here with the offset so that we once again get, we don't have an overlap that is built into the sleeve here by default. In terms of circumference now for the sleeve, this makes a lot more sense to me. Of course, we want to taper the sleeve so that where the sleeve meets the hand, it will not be as wide as this. Of course, that is something that we'll have to do. But at least for the part of the sleeve that connects to the arm side, now this makes a lot more sense to me in terms of width, right? This, or in terms of circumference, this matches nicely here. So yeah, where did this leave us then? Well, I think I still want to make the garment slightly bigger than what we have to address what I have just said about the fact that I don't want to have any stretching within this particular torso here. And we have a little bit of stretching right now. And I actually think that I actually really need to get rid of that to begin with. So let's put the sleeve on hold just for a second. And let's talk about how we can actually make this particular garment here just a little bit bigger so that we get rid of all of the stretching that we currently have. So what can we do to make this garment bigger then? So we want to make it, about 3 to 4% bigger, essentially. That's kind of where we want to wind up, right? So how can we actually scale all of this up and yet keep the fit, keep the placement of the panels over the body there? There's a few different ways that we can scale up and down garments, okay? Because what we have to do here is a change that will be global to the whole garment and is not a huge change, and we don't have to change, let's say, the overall proportions because we're keeping the proportions of the body that we currently have. We can probably keep this relatively simple and just scale everything up by about 4%, 4 to 5%. That will probably work quite well, and that's what we will do. But if you are in a position where you actually need to change the size of a garment and you have to do much, much bigger tweaks to the size of the garment and perhaps even fit a garment to a different character, so different proportions entirely, you also have options within Marvel's Designer to do that. I won't cover how to do this in the context of this particular class, just for sake of keeping this class relatively contained to a particular topic. But what you need is a function called fitting suit. And you can actually find the buttons for that. Once again, it kind of keeps on changing between the different versions of Mars Designer, but it's right here. So create fitting suit and then retarget draping. So if we don't have any content related to that on outgang.studio, I will make sure to add some of that within the future. It's not that complicated, and you can probably also already find tutorials on how to use a fitting suit, either on Mars Designer's YouTube page or elsewhere on YouTube. And we will eventually add content to outgang.studio that is also related to that. But so this is the answer to the question of how do I change the actual fit of a garment to fit a different character or very different proportions. This asks you to have two different avatars, one that is the original one on which a garment has been created, and one that will be the avatar after the body changes that you are looking to do there. So, and there's different ways to go about reshaping the size of a particular avatar. One thing you could do, of course, is to change the avatar that you already have within the scene. If what you're looking to do are changes that are not that complicated, we could actually go within avatar, as in within the menu here, and we could go within the avatar editor. And in here, we can actually tweak the different body proportions that we have here. Where it says here avatar size, we can actually change some of these values here. So I'm not sure here if I just do a very quick change just to show you here. So neck, let's say neck base circumference here, have a value of about 36 centimeters. If I say, I don't know, 40 centimeters, you can see that it's actually going to change the size of the avatar itself. So I won't say more about that within this particular class, just for the sake of keeping this class relatively contained. But we will cover this in a future class on Agang.studio to make sure that you have the information as to how to go about using this. So as I've said, in this particular context, this should be relatively simple because we just want to scale everything up and we're not actually changing the proportions of the avatar itself. We can very likely just scale this up by about 5% or so, and this should give us the exact fit that we are looking for, since I'm looking to more or less scale everything up by the same amount there. So let's go ahead and do that here. I'm just going to take everything here within our 2D pattern window, and I'm just going to scale this up here, and I'm going to eyeball this really, but 5% really isn't that much of a difference. Of course, if we wanted to be extremely precise with this, we could start by, let's say, taking a particular segment somewhere, so 7.8. So 5% of that, perhaps we have an edge somewhere whose value would be a little bit easier to judge here. Okay, so this particular edge here is 11 centimeters exactly. So plus 5% would be 5 times 11, that's 55, so 11.55 centimeters if we want to scale this up by 5% exactly here. So I'm just going to take everything, press A here, select everything that I have within our 2D pattern window, other than the sleeve, of course. And let's just scale everything up. And let's see afterwards. So this particular segment now is 11.78. So that was a little bit too much. Let's just scale this down here just slightly here. And 11.68, that's probably good enough. It's a little bit more than 5%, but I think that should probably be fine. Let me freeze the sleeve and let's just resimulate everything. Oh, and let's turn on gravity once again within the scene. This is going to help the garment fit better to the character, of course. So within our scene browser here, simulation properties, gravity, let's set this to minus 9800. And resimulate. And let's just fix whatever is happening here. Yanking on stuff is often my preferred way of fixing something that is not properly fitted over the character there. Hopefully this is enough. Else we can always reset arrangement for some or all of these garment pieces, which we might have because there's a twist here that, oh no, okay, there we go. That wasn't too hard to get rid of. But yeah, worst case scenario, I could have taken all of these different panels, press Control F to reset arrangement, which does ask us to resimulate a lot of stuff from the beginning, but sometimes that's kind of what you need to do, or perhaps just do this on one or two of these panels here. So I could have reset arrangement on this panel here, and then this panel here. Take this one here, move it towards the back. Take this one here, move it towards the front. Freeze everything else, so freeze these panels here on the side. Resimulate like that. See, that would have also allowed us to get rid of this kind of twist that was happening there. So if I unfreeze everything, so we still have a little bit of stretching around the breasts, but we don't have much stretching on the back here. There's a little bit of it around the shoulders, which I'm fine with because we'll always have some stretching here because gravity is pulling down on the fabric. The fabric is being pulled down around the shoulders. The gravity is pulling on the fabric. There's a weight there. Of course, that will always create stretching over the shoulders. That's kind of expected. So there's not really anything else that needs, anything there needs to be addressed. And the overall fit is actually better. So we are starting to get a few folds here, which I like. I know I can get obsessive over removing folds, but having a few folds is obviously very natural, right? So it's not necessarily a problem that we have these. And so I think the fit is actually overall a lot better there. I think it's already a lot more natural. So yeah, so this wasn't that complicated of a change. But like I said, we can create a fitting suit and play around with avatar proportions if ever we are in a situation that we need to make these bigger proportional changes to an avatar and to the garment. And we will cover that in a future class at some point. But for now, this is all that we need. Okay, so let's see if we still have that bug, by the way, when I select these particular segments here. Yeah, see, I still have that bug. Okay, so we're back here at having 34.77 centimeters for some reason. So yeah, so that bug is still there. So make sure to have a lot of skepticism when you actually select a bunch of segments and look at the overall length that it gives you here, because that bug is back here. We're back here at having a value here of 34 centimeters, which of course 13 plus 12 plus 8 plus 14 does not give us 34. So it's interesting to know why this is happening. This feels like something that should be reported to the Marvelous Designer team. Might have something to do actually with selecting these handles here. If I select the segment here, segment there, we have the proper values. But if I actually click on this little Bezier handle that is here, or if I click on this segment in a way that selects the Bezier handle at the same time, yeah, for some reason you can see that the measurement is not coming across there. So, okay. Yeah, I guess I kind of understand where the bug is coming from, but it's this is definitely a bug regardless. Okay, so 47.76 centimeters. That's how wide we want the sleeve to be. So I'm happy with that. Let's continue scaling this up then. We can unfreeze our sleeve. So it's 47 point, I don't quite remember, but 0.5 should be good. And let's do the same thing that we have done where we disable the gravity within the scene. And now if I simulate, my sleeve will now float and the rest of the garment will float as well. Let me freeze everything other than the sleeves. And now we can play around with the opening here of the sleeve where it connects with the arm side and make sure that that has the proper shape. So the way we're going to do that really is we're going to continue to use our Styleline editing tools. In this particular case here, so let me use the Edit Styleline button right here. Let me once again detach this particular menu. I'll also get rid of the library here. We don't need that here. Select Edit Styleline, and you'll see here I won't be able to really do the best changes here. If I take this particular edge and I kind of move it like this actually kind of gives us something that's actually kind of not too bad. But we will likely have to add a bunch of points to the segment here of the sleeve that connects to the arm side so that we can get the proper shape going on there. So let me just go ahead and do that. I can get out here of Styleline editing, resimulate this just to let this fall down a little bit so that it's in a bit more of a natural position. But you can see that the curve here, we're getting here a very, very awkward curve. So we definitely have to add a few points to this here. So let me just add a point here to the center line of the segment that connects to the arm side. Also rotate this around on the other side so that I can kind of see a little bit better where this will actually connect to the torso. Perhaps move these segments, move these panels over, disable the measurements. And let's continue to tweak this here. So let's see how far we can push this using the Styleline editing feature. So once again, I'm just shaping this until I'm getting a nice straight curve or straight line, I suppose, within the 3D window. The consequence, though, is that sometimes this sort of happens. It just creates this kind of angularity here to the panels as opposed to give us what we kind of expect to create a bit of a wave shape or a sin wave shape. So yeah, I guess we've reached the limit of what we can do with these Styleline editing tools. I guess we'll have to go and tweak this manually here. So let me press Z, go within our 2D pattern window, and just tweak these curves manually. And so I'm kind of looking to create some kind of wave shape here. And as I'm doing that, you can see within the 3D pattern window, starting to get something that is more and more straight here. So this is looking pretty good. Maybe I can actually tweak this a little bit using the Styleline editing feature. And that's a problem. So yeah, I guess we've reached the limit of what we'll be able to do with these Styleline editing tools. There's a slight curve here that could be nice to try and address. Let me see if I play around with these handles if we're able to control for that. Yeah, just like so. That looks pretty good to me. Straight in the front, straight in the back. I'm pretty happy with this. We're not quite matching though the same angle. You can see the angle of the arm side on the torso is not as steep. So using our styling editing feature, let's just move this point here a little bit further towards the top. Okay, let's sew everything together. Perhaps we can already actually taper a little bit the opening here for the wrist. There too, I'm happy just eyeballing this, but we could do the same trick that we have done with the measurements here, where we, in this particular case, use a basic circumference measure, go all the way around the wrist here to see what is the exact size here of the opening for the sleeve that we need, at least if we want it to be skin tight, of course, which I don't necessarily want, but we can see here, so 15 centimeters or so would be the lowest limit that we could really go for the width here of the sleeve. But I'm happy to try to just eyeball this here a little bit. So let's use our scale Styleline, and let's scale down this particular opening here until we get something that is a lot closer to what we expect to have. About like this or so. So we have here finally a segment of about 20 centimeters, just a little bit under that. I'm happy with that. We'll have to tweak the shape of this, of course, but we can go with this for now. Let's simulate once again, make sure that this starts to rest a little bit more nicely around the arm. Yeah, that's definitely too narrow, actually. Let me make the opening here of the sleeves a little bit bigger so that she can actually move her arm in and out of the sleeves. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Let's go for about 24 centimeters perhaps or so. That should be good enough for now. Let's turn gravity back on within the scene and let's do everything up together. So simulation properties here, gravity minus 9800. And so for the sewing, what we're going to do is that we're going to create an M-to-N segment sewing. So within our 3D pattern window then, in fact, let me just unfreeze everything as well. Okay, Shift N. So segment 1, segment 2. For the sleeve portion, press Enter, and then select the same or the corresponding segments in the same order over the panels for the torso. Press Enter, and that should be good enough. So let's take our sleeve, and then within our 2D pattern window, let's right-click on our sleeve panel, and let's do a clone pattern with linked editing, symmetric pattern with sewing. And let's simulate. Okay, so there's one thing that I haven't done properly. First of all, I'm quite interested to figure out why is it that there's all this stretching here, but that could be something to do with these seams that have been created. Interesting, but we can put that on the back burner for now, and we'll address this later. But there is one critical thing that I have not done that I should have done with the sleeves, which is that, as you remember, we've talked about the opening of the arm side here being about 47 centimeters. And we had created a rectangle that had that particular size to it. Now, the problem, okay, that we are encountering here is that we do not have 47 centimeters anymore for the segments that are on the sleeve that connect to the arm side, because we have added this wave to it, right? And so because of that, now this particular segment, or these two segments rather, because there are two of them, are not 47 centimeters anymore because of the shape that we have built in there. So if I select the two of these now we have actually 52 centimeters, which means that the whole sleeve actually needs to be scaled down so that we have 47 centimeters, 47.5 centimeters, but accounting for the kind of wave that we have just built in here. So let's select our panel here, and we're just going to smush it here vertically, just like so. And let's do that until we have 47.5 centimeters. So I need to smush it just a little bit more than this. 47.57. That's good enough for me. Let's resimulate. And there we go. Now the sleeve fits a lot better. Okay, so what can we draw from this? What can we observe so far in terms of fit? I really like the fit around the torso. I like that there is, once again, a little bit of looseness that is kind of built in there. Since this will be a coat, this makes a ton of sense to me. The thing that is bothering me, though, for now, is that I think that the sleeve actually wound up being a little bit too wide. Once again, so of course, this is all a question of design. If you're making something where you want the sleeves to be a little bit loose, then this is pretty much what you would expect there. But I actually kind of don't want that. I want a sleeve that's going to be a little bit tighter here. So I'm starting to think that we should actually compress the arm side a little bit more closer to the body here, especially once we start to add gravity in there. You can see how now this is actually starting to sag quite a lot. And another thing I could actually do is, since I know that I don't necessarily want to have a lot of stretching within this particular garment, I could actually go ahead and actually reduce the amount of stretchiness that is already built into the fabric to begin with, because we're using the default properties for the fabric in this particular case, and the default fabric of Mars Designer does have some stretching that is built in, which is very obvious to us simply by looking at a garment that we have here. And especially here, if I actually click here over the shoulders, like the gravity here is actually giving us quite a lot of stretching here. So 113%. That's too high for me. So we want to remove some of the sagginess here that is under the armpit. And we'll probably have to tighten up here the pattern around the armpit a little bit. But before I do that, I think it would be a good idea to already kind of start to move towards a fabric type for this particular garment that is closer to what we expect it to be in the end. As I said, I haven't made a decision as to what kind of fabric I want this to be in the end, but I know that I don't want to be a fabric that has a lot of stretchiness built in there. So we can already at least control for that within our properties, our fabric properties. So let's go ahead and do that together. Within our scene browser, we're going to go back here within fabric. And when I click here on the fabric, which is a default fabric that is applied to everything here, we can go within physical property at the bottom here, and we can actually tweak these particular settings. Now, of course, if I go to preset here, okay, we have and a little drop-down menu that is right here. There are a lot of different presets that come with Marvelous Designer. A lot of different presets that are very, very useful in different cases. And if you don't know what does what or what kind of fabric some of these are, can be very time-consuming and confusing to try to just find the actual type of fabric that you want to use. If you already know the exact material that you want to use over something, then it's great to just pick it out of the list. But in my particular case here, I don't know right now what I want, but I know that I want something that has a little bit less stretching. So the other thing that I could do, instead of just trying to hunt for the perfect preset here, the other thing I could do is just to instead go within the actual physical properties themselves. So where it says preset here, I'm just going to open this particular drop-down menu that is right here. And instead, I could actually just play around with these values here. That could actually be another way that I could actually do it, right? So these are the default properties from Marvelous Designer that we have. And so we can actually start to play around with these. Now, my goal is not to explain how all of these work in the context of a class, and at least not this particular class. But it's good to know at the very least that playing around with these particular values will obviously give you some cloth that will react in different ways. And the ones that I am particularly interested in this particular case is everything that is called stretch, because that's what I want to reduce. I want to reduce the stretchiness of the fabric so that the fabric stretches less. One thing I could do, of course, is look for a preset whose stretching values are closer to what I want them to be. Or I could also just tweak these values myself. So that's what we're going to do here. We're actually going to tweak these values ourselves. And the thing that you need to know, okay, about these values here, or at least most of these, not necessarily all of these, but most of these here. So the ones that are called stretch, shear, and bending. What you need to know about these is that this particular value here, so 27, does not mean that the fabric will stretch to 27%, or that if I increase this particular slider somehow, I will make the fabric stretch more. That's not how it actually works, surprisingly and very counterintuitively. These values do not represent how much the fabric will stretch, but rather it represents how stiff is the fabric to stretchiness, meaning that as you increase these stretch values, your fabric will have a tendency to stretch less, not more. And you can actually do that very easily interactively here. If I just go within simulation mode right here, and let me just press Alt2 here to go back within solid mode. You'll see that as I increase these values, our fabric will actually stretch less as opposed to stretch more. So this is stiffness. And as you can see, as I increase these values, in fact, as I play around with these sliders, let's say if I put them all the way down to 0, you can look how now baggy and how much the cloth starts to sag down, right? So these values are inverted, if you will. So let me increase these values here, stretch both weft and for the warp. So let's say, yeah, somewhere around 78 perhaps is good. This, as you can see, already gives us something that is a lot stiffer, which is what we expect it to be. But the other values that are important actually is the shear values. So shear values and stretch values are all the same thing, okay? Stretch weft means how much stretching there is on the horizontal axis. Stretch warp, how much stretching there is on the vertical axis. Now, this gets a little bit more complicated than this because that is based on the original orientation of these fabric panels and not the orientation that they currently have within Marvelous Designer. And if that does not make sense to you, one thing you can do actually is go here within Edit Texture, and you can actually see what is the orientation of the panels here. And you can even just rotate this around if you wanted to change what is the orientation of the weft and the warp. Anyway, point being that we can, as you can see, control the amount of stretchiness over the weft and the warp independently. So some type of weaves can employ different types of fibers on the weft and the warp axis. So that would be a way to do it. But the other ones that are important to know is the shear values. Shearing simply means the amount of stretching that is on the bias, and the bias being the diagonal axis of a fabric. So in this particular case here, I have stretch, weft, and warp relatively high, or stiffness to stretching that are relatively high, but the shear is very low. So it means that the fabric can stretch a lot diagonally, but it cannot stretch a lot horizontally or vertically, which is very strange, which is very likely why we are getting all this kind of weird stuff happening on the back there. So I want to increase the shear values. If I want to keep my life simple and I want some fabric that is more resistant to stretching, it's not enough to play around with these two values here. You also have to increase the shear values. So let me put the shear values at about the same values that we have. And this accounts for stretching both on the X, the Y, and on the diagonals. Okay, this might be now a little bit too resistant to stretching. So we kind of want to find the sweet spot here. So this was about 27 before. Let me actually reduce these values here. Maybe go around 65, maybe perhaps 60. Let's try that as a blanket value and see the kind of result that we get out of that. One thing I perhaps want to do as well, though, is to increase also the stiffness to bending, because now these values are also very, very low, which means that the fabric bends easily. But it does not stretch easily, but it bends easily, and so which is very likely the result why we're the reason why we're getting all these folds here that are sort of happening everywhere over the fabric there. In fact, also just for the sake of it, let me reduce the particle distance so that we can see a little bit better what is happening here. Let me set the particle distance to 10, which has the consequence, of course, of giving us more resolution for our folds. So we can see the kind of result that we're getting here. It's not very pretty right now. And we're getting all of these folds here because the fabric right now does not stretch easily, which is very obvious to us because the stretch map tells us so. But it bends easily, which means that we're starting to get a lot of this kind of crumpled fabric effect, which can look pretty cool. And there are definitely materials that crumple easily, but don't necessarily stretch. You know, I'm thinking of some type of artificial synthetic materials can kind of look like that. I have a particular raincoat that always looks like it's kind of crumpled. You know, it's made of these synthetic fibers. It looks like it's always kind of crumpled. It does not stretch in any sort of way, but it bends very easily. So in this particular case, I also don't really want that. So let's also increase the stiffness here in relation to the bending. And as I'm doing that, you can actually see within our 3D viewport how we are actually getting rid of a lot of those folds that were there. So now we have something that is both resistant to bending and is also resistant to stretching. Of course, we want to play with these values until we find the sweet spot. You know, like now I have 5% stretching over the shoulders, but everywhere else it's practically zero, as you can see. So yeah, what we want is just to essentially find the sweet spot, you know, what gives us a natural kind of drape and gives us essentially the amount of folds that we are looking for. So I think I want to perhaps reduce these values even more. Let's go for just a blanket 50-50 everywhere. These are not the final values, okay? These are just kind of values that I'm looking for to get more of a harder looking fabric. And of course, the presets have values that are perhaps better and that don't necessarily are the same for the shear and the bias on the bending. And so on and so forth. We'll get values that are not exactly the same and that are perhaps a little bit more natural. But at least as a starting point for now, I think this is quite useful for us. This does start to look to me a little bit more like what I expect out of a coat. So I think I'm happy with this. There's some floatiness that we can see in different places here. There's the whole conversation of should we have tweaked these values before we spend so much time tweaking the fit? Because obviously this impacts the fit quite a lot, as you can see, which is a very, very interesting question. And the answer is probably yes. I probably should have tweaked this earlier on. But it's something that we can't actually address at this point here. I think I still am getting a fabric that is a little bit too stiff for my own taste. So let me reduce these values even more. And no one says that the resistance to bending needs to be the same as the resistance to stretching and vice versa there. So we can definitely have some of these values be a little bit different, you know. But I really like how the back is kind of standing up right now. Like the back, fitting on the back, I really, really like it personally. I think the only issue that we're getting right now is just around the collar, as you can see. So we're starting to get some shapes here that are not all that great. So we perhaps want to address this before we go any further. But now that we have the sleeves that are connected there too, and everything seems to be relatively okay in terms of fit, we can definitely start to now address the fit a little bit better, considering the type of material that we are looking for here, taking that into consideration. And we have a little bit less of that sagginess too for the underarms there. So that's pretty good. It is definitely one of those things that you want to tweak sooner rather than later because of how much of an impact you can see that it has over the fit of the garment there. This has a major impact, you know. So if you spend all your time always tweaking your garment with the default Mars Designer settings, and only at the end do you play around with the material properties, you definitely will start to get some nasty surprises here, right? So this is one of those things that you want to address sooner rather than later to make sure that you are always working with a type of fabric that is very similar to what you expect it to be in the end. But the good thing now is that I have all of my basic garment is accounted for. I have the basic shape that I want for the what will be a coat. Of course, eventually this is a coat. We'll want to open the coat perhaps. Although my goal is to make a coat that is closed. So we will obviously add an opening to the coat at some point, but it won't change the actual fit because I want the coat to look like this in terms of its fit when the coat is closed. So it doesn't really matter to me that we don't have an opening that is built into the coat right now. But so we're still relatively early in creating this particular garment, so it's really a good time to address the kind of fitting issues that we have here. And it wouldn't be a bad idea either to make an actual choice as to what we want this particular garment to be made out of in the end. And I think the answer for me is leather. I think I like leather. I think I want to go for some type of leather over this particular coat. I'm quite happy with that as a material. So based upon that, of course, we could try to either continue to play with these properties until we get the exact folding that we expect it to have. Or we could also go ahead and choose one of the leather presets that we have. We don't have that many leathers, unfortunately, within Mars Designer. In fact, looking at the list right now, we have no leathers at all other than the trim full grain leather, but that's very, very stiff leather. That's not really a good one. So because we don't have any default actually for leathers in here, we can just create our own really. As I said, we're already kind of almost there really. The thing that you need to know about leather, and we do have a class on Studio about material properties. So if you're interested to know in terms of material properties, how is leather different than, let's say, cotton or linen or something else? There is a class that we have that really delves deep into that and what is things like buckling points and buckling ratios and these sorts of things. But the important, perhaps the important part that we need just for the sake of this particular class is just to say that leather has a little bit of stretching to it. But as we said, that stretching really isn't all that high. But it is fairly bendy and it doesn't have much of what we call buckling points. So leather does not have a tendency to buckle, which are these kind of angular points, as if like angular breaks that seems to get created on fabric in different instances, on different types of fabrics. It's very obvious on some, and on other types of fabrics, it's almost not there at all. So buckling points, we have quite a lot of those, or rather, we don't have any of those in the context of the leather. We have very, very little of them. So meaning that the properties that we have here are actually fairly close to what we expect leather to be at the end, in the sense that buckling here, all of that is set to 0, which is pretty good. I'm not sure whether leather needs to have buckling of exactly 0. My guess is there's probably a little bit of buckling in there, perhaps, but definitely those values, those buckling values should be very, very low here. So we'll keep those at 0 unless there's any reason to tweak how much buckling we have over our surface. We won't do it. We can keep just these values of 0. Now, of course, We had Mike Couchy over a few months ago, who was talking not about material properties in the context of cloth necessarily, but just shader creation. And he is a senior VFX artist, and he was talking about in the context of shader creation. If you ever have values for anything really that is either 0 or 1, you're probably making a mistake because there's really not a lot in real life that is at that extreme as far as any settings is concerned, really. So there's probably there something interesting for us to think about when it comes to having values of 0 here for buckling. But anyway, regardless, let's keep these values at 0 for now, even though perhaps in the end they should be slightly higher than this. I'm not at the point of trying to get the exact fine values here that are exact, as much as just kind of get a ballpark here. So I'm happy keeping these at 0, even though ultimately in the end, they probably should not be 0. So coming back to Pinterest, we can just look a little bit around to see different leather jackets here to see what they kind of look like. See, this is kind of what I was talking about. Not sure this is leather here. I'm not sure what the material is, but it doesn't look like that, like leather to me. But we can see here that there's a lot of little folds here, right? So this is a fabric that is actually has a high degree of bendiness to it, but not necessarily a lot of stretchiness to it. Same, let's say this one here, the amount of folds that we get, there's a lot of high frequency folds in there, communicates to me that it's probably fabric that has a lot of bendiness to it. Whereas something like leather here, if we look at some of these other leather coats that we have, let's say this one here, right? So this one here does not bend very easily, but perhaps stretches a little bit more. What I'm telling you here isn't really a science. It's more just how to try to interpret for yourself the kind of folds that you're seeing and what you kind of would expect there to be for the kind of values that you would expect there to be in the end. But so I think having a fabric here that's a little bit more bendy to what I currently have is probably a good idea, because I want to go for something that is kind of leatherish, and I don't want to go for something that's perhaps too flat, although it's not uninteresting to do it. Definitely there is some stretching within leather, of course. This is really, really nice, by the way. And I love the different types of materials that are used in different places over the coat there. I think that's really, really cool. So I really, really like this one here. So, okay, so leather, that's the choice that we're making here. So I'm just looking around here to see the kind of folds that we get over the garment in different places here. And let's try to tweak our settings in Marvelous Designer until we try to get something that kind of looks like this. This one's pretty cool to me. I really like this one. Of course, as we continue to refine this particular jacket, we'll get closer and closer there. Like our sleeves still are too big. So we want to make them a little bit better fitting. But I'm still kind of curious to tweak these settings, these material properties a little bit more to get a little bit closer to what we are, to what we're seeing here. And we can see here too that there really isn't all that many buckling points, by the way, just by virtue of these folds being very, very nice and curvy in different places. Anyway, okay, so let's give a little bit more bendiness to this particular fabric. So I want to, let me turn on simulation here again. Let's reduce these values here a little bit more. These values were about 10, I believe, the bending values. So let's go maybe somewhere around 25, maybe 20. I don't really care about having these values be all the same, but just somewhere in that particular ballpark, I think makes me very, very happy. And you can see we now have more folds happening because our fabric bends more, and perhaps a little bit more stretching would be a good idea here. Leather does stretch, of course. And I think that right now this is still a little too, perhaps a little too stiff for me. So let's reduce the resistance to stretch a little bit more than this. Let's try 30. And also one thing I can do at this state, reduce the particle distance even more. The reason why I want to do this at this state is just to see how this will look at a higher resolution, how these folds will actually look. Even though ultimately we will work with a higher particle distance, because working with a particle distance that's too low obviously starts to slow us down significantly there. But it is useful in the context of just judging how a fabric looks like, right? To work with a slightly lower particle distance just to set the material properties to what we want them to be. Yeah, so I like what's happening overall. We have fitting issues that we need to address. But overall, these folds, like if I look at the size of these folds here, if I look at the kind of diamond folds that we're getting here, we have that kind of nice roundness here. Now, if I want to go even further than this, just for the sake of demonstration, just for the sake of understanding how this fabric actually looks like. One thing I could do, of course, at this particular state is to play around with the material properties, or rather the visual properties of our fabric. So here, once again, having my fabric that is selected here, where it says material here, where it says type, we'll switch over from fabric matte to leather here. And let's reduce the color of this so it's some more towards the black. Again, just for the sake of getting a visual result that is more in line with what I expect it to be. Yeah, so this is starting to look pretty leatherish, right? If I want these folds overall to look a little bit smaller than this, I can continue to tweak the stiffness to bending. And perhaps we might actually wind up somewhere near where we were in the beginning, perhaps. Which I'm fine, because I do think in general that leather does bend quite a lot. Now, again, there are very, very many types of leathers. Some have no bendiness at all and are extremely stiff. You know, if you consider something like boiled leather, you obviously want to have all these values stretch and bend up to like 100% because it's like a hard shell. So of course, you know, leather changes quite a lot, right? Depending on how it's been treated. So there's no right or wrong answer. There's no like one particular setting that is what leather is and nothing else works really. It's really just a question of what type of leather you are looking to get here. But once again, because we don't have a lot of buckling here for me, this really communicates leather to me. And yeah, perhaps some type of relatively thin leather would actually work in this particular case. I don't want to go for like a big, bulky winter coat. I want to keep something that will be in the end relatively nice and nicely fitting. Something that perhaps you could wear during spring or during a light breeze during summertime. So something that still communicates a leather that is relatively thin and flexible, as opposed to something that is very thick and bulky there. I think I'm getting happy with this. Overall, the amount of folds here, the type of folds, the shape of the folds that we're getting, I'm getting quite happy with this overall. Very likely want to continue tweaking these values as we go on, but I think I'm quite happy with these to work with these for now. Let me check the stretch map here. I see we still really don't have that much stretching overall, right? Like here, we're 100%. There's no stretching here at all. Over the breasts, we're still at like 102, and over the shoulders here, like where gravity really pulls us down, we're at about 105. So overall, there really isn't that much stretching happening in here, right? So that's pretty good, which also makes me wonder if we could actually perhaps reduce these values here. Perhaps let's try 25 for our stretching values. And I'm just going to simulate this and let it rest. There you go. That's looking pretty leathery, right? Yeah, so I'm pretty happy with this. So let's go with this here. I think overall this looks pretty good. Let's continue with this, and we will tweak these values as we need, of course. I like, by the way, the kind of area of tension that we get here over the shoulders. We're getting these nice folds that are radiating out of there. That looks pretty good to me. But yeah, a few adjustments now that need to happen to the fit of the garment because of all the changes that we have done here. So if we look around, yeah, there's a little bit here. There's one or two folds here that are a little bit unsavory, perhaps. So this here, that doesn't look all that great to me. So we want to tweak that here a little bit. And we want to get a better fit here for the sleeves that are a little bit too wide. So we want to reduce some of the fabric that is on the sleeves. For the rest of the torso, I'm quite happy with this. I think this looks pretty natural to me. I'm very happy with all this here overall. I'm happy with the back. We have a few folds here going down, dropping down from the shoulders. So the shoulder blades are here. We're getting a few nice vertical folds that are kind of dropping down from that. I think that looks very natural, so I'm quite happy with that. We could have a few more folds here. That wouldn't necessarily be a bad idea. So maybe the garment is actually overly fitted towards the back. It would be nice to have a few natural looking folds here, a few natural looking diamond folds there. We'll see about that. But so we have our work cut out for us. Let me get a higher particle distance so that this is workable. So right now we're set to 5 here. We can go back to 10. I think we can keep it at 10. I think I'm fine keeping it at 10. I think I still get a relatively good performance, but I have better folds that I can use to judge whether the fit is good or not. So for these little folds that are kind of over the clavicles here are looking a little bit well, not well fitted for lack of a better term. Essentially, this seemed relatively easy to fix. We probably just want to take this particular panel here, take this point that is here, and kill the simulation. Take this point here, probably just move it inward a little bit, just like that, just to remove a little bit of that fabric here, and resimulate. And there you go. That's pretty simple. So for the arms, then, let's take a look at those. That's where that hopefully yet again our Styleline tools can actually help us out. I'm skeptical, but we'll give them a try. Okay. So we have a few different choices here. It could be tempting to take the scale Styleline, take the whole arm side and kind of scale it down. And I guess we can try that just for the sake of demonstration, but I think this will be a little bit too blunt as a tool because it's going to reduce the whole arm side everywhere. So I kind of kind of not sure that this is going to work, but it still is interesting that Marvelous Designer 12 we can even do this, right? So, yeah, just for the sake of it, let's just see where this is going to lead us here. So let's take this, shorten a little bit the arm side, make it a little bit more narrow. It's doing all the changes that is required to all of the pieces that are there. Let's simulate here once again. And that's not too bad, actually, right? That's really not too bad. I'm just concerned about stretching now. See, like we're starting to get a lot of stretching over the shoulders because of that. But it doesn't look unnatural to me. So perhaps we can keep this. But at the same time, I mean, we had some really interesting folds here. Now they're all gone. So, and our stretch map here has a little bit of stretching there. I'm not sure that this is the change that I want. Because although it works, I want to keep some of these folds here. This is, for me, it is these folds that make this look like nice leather, right? So although that kind of worked, I think it's, yeah, for me, it's just a little bit too blunt as a tool. So maybe I don't want to do it that way. I definitely want to continue using the Styleline tools as much as I can in this particular case. So one thing I could do perhaps is, well, we could try the edit Styleline here. See if there's a way to maybe take these points here, move them further inward like this. We could try that. Take the point here under the armpit and do the same change to it. Although looking at, yeah, no, that's not working. That's not a good idea. Okay, so let's not do it like this. So actually, this could be fairly simple now that we think about it, because the sleeve really won't change shape. The sleeve will be a circular or a cylindrical piece of fabric that will go all the way around the arm, just like so. So the sleeve really shouldn't change. So I'm actually going to just delete all of these points, all of these seams, and actually just for now, just deactivate the sleeves completely here. So let's just deactivate these. So press Control J to deactivate them, which means that now when we simulate, they will be completely disregarded within Marvelous Designer. They will not have any impact at all over the simulation. And let's just tighten up the arm side, especially around this particular zone here. All right, that's a lot tighter. We're getting a fold here that I would like to get rid of. So from this particular piece of fabric. So hopefully I can do it relatively easily. I'll try it. This doesn't necessarily always work well, but I'll try just taking this point, moving it up a little bit. It changes the whole curve, but because this is a relatively minor change, this could be enough. And yeah, I think I think this fits pretty well. So let's reconnect the sleeve and see where we stand on this. So we made some pretty significant changes to the overall diameter of the sleeve. So let's see where we wind up now in terms of diameter here. So we have here 12. If we reselect these segments yet again, make sure that we have a proper value here that avoids the bug that we had before. So 42 centimeters. These segments also need to be 42 centimeters. We're at 47.5. All right, for 43 centimeters, I think that's good enough. There's perhaps a point 0.5 too much, but that's okay. I don't think that's going to have much of an impact on something that is 42 centimeters to begin with. There, it's a very small amount there, so that should be pretty good. And for the sake of doing this properly, we'll do the same thing, okay? Where we disable the gravity, freeze everything. I know this sounds like a lot of steps, but I think it's worth it to make sure that the arm side, that the sleeve has the exact shape that it needs to connect to the torso there. So we'll do the same thing here. So I'm freezing everything. In fact, I should probably even disable it completely because freezing will still keep it active for the sake of collision purposes. Whereas if I deactivate here, so press Control J, when it is deactivated, it is ignored for the purposes of collision, which is actually what I want. So I want to be able to simulate these sleeves without having to deal with collision because I don't want them to collide. I want them to just float and show me their natural shape without having to be colliding with the rest of the body there. So once again here, then let's go to our scene browser. Let's go down to our simulation properties. Let me set that to 0. I have 16 CPUs. Why don't I set that here too? To that particular value so that I use all of my CPU. And yeah, let's simulate here once again. And yeah, you can see how the shape of my sleeves now look very, very different. So the curve that we have needs to be tweaked a little bit. I'm skipping over this part of the class simply because this is redundant with what we have done before. So we'll just fast forward to after the changes have been done. And finally, let's redo our seam. Now, I really want this particular seam for the underside of the sleeve to connect exactly with where the seam is on the side of the torso there. So hopefully our end-to-end segment sewing will give us that. But if it doesn't, we'll have to manually tweak these and place these ourselves. So one side, press Enter, select all the seams on the other side. Rather, all the segments on the other side. Press Enter. And that should be good enough. Yeah, looks pretty good to me. Our sleeves are too long. This is not the length that we should have, so we can shorten these down a little bit. I would rather actually just cut through, actually. If I take this and I scale it down, if I do a scale on this, it's going to change the shape of the arm side here, which I really, really don't want. So this really has to be preserved the way that it currently is. So I guess one thing I could do is perhaps just to add an internal line like this somewhere. It's not actually going from edge to edge, the internal line I have just created. By the way, the shortcut for that, we haven't mentioned it in the context of this particular class, but you press G. G on your keyboard will allow you to add an internal line. So one thing I can do here is just add an internal line. It doesn't even need to be complete, so go from edge to edge. But just adding an internal line like this, and then afterward right-clicking on the internal line, and then doing a extend, trim, and add point to pattern outline. And afterward, take the internal line and do a cut and sew. So what this does is that now I could play around with as you can see, the length of the sleeve here that I have, and that won't actually disturb whatever is happening with the arm side. That being said, I actually kind of want to still actually do what I wanted to do, which is just to actually cut out part of the fabric because I don't want to just scale this down. I also want to, I want the opening of the sleeve to be a little bit wider there. So truth be told, really the only thing I can really do in this particular case then is to do a cut and sew and to remove this here. So we're 2 hours within this particular class, and we haven't done much design work on top of this jacket so far. We've mostly been talking about fit and how to create this particular jacket within Marvelous Designer directly. And so what we're going to do is that we're going to break this class down into multiple parts then, because I kind of want to keep these classes at about 3 hours maximum. So what we're going to do today then to complete this particular class, that we're just going to look as to how to create a simple collar and a simple opening to this particular jacket. And then within the next class, then we will continue to work on this jacket, and we will really focus more on design and adding details left and right to make this jacket more interesting there. But I think it's kind of interesting to have one particular class that is focused on creating the basics of it, getting a basic fit, and afterward to have a second class where we talk more about how to create the details on top of this. So I actually kind of like this. So we're going to add a collar to this and add a front zipper. We're probably not going to keep this ultimately. I think we'll probably want to undo some of that work when it comes to the second class, where we will focus a little bit more on freestyling and interesting design for our jacket. But at least for now, we'll have a nice base that we can complete so that if you're looking to create a jacket yourself, you have all the information that you need to be able to go ahead and do so. So for the collar then, we're going to keep it relatively simple. We're going to go for something that's kind of like this here, or at least one of those kind of rounded collars that we can see in some of these leather jackets that we have in here. So we're going to go for something relatively simple. And we're going to add a zipper, and that will be where we will end this particular class. Okay, so for the collar then, what I want is to extend this particular panel of fabric a lot closer to the neck, and then we will add an extra piece of fabric afterward to create the collar. So that shouldn't be all that complicated, I think. We can try our Styleline editing tools to see if we can actually get those to behave in this particular case, and if we're able to actually do the kind of work here that we want to be able to do here to extend this particular piece of the garment. So let's go ahead and try that out. So once again, using our Edit Styleline button that is right here, let me just detach this here. Let's select this particular panel here, and I'm just going to move this a lot further up on the neck, this particular point that is here. Let's going to do it symmetrically, and let's do the same thing with this particular point, and finally the same thing with this one here. Alternatively, actually, it wouldn't maybe not be a bad idea now that I think about it, to instead try to do a scale on this, because I actually want to also, well, actually the back doesn't really need to be adjusted that much now that I think about it. The back is actually where we want it to be. You want to add some fabric here as a separate piece, but because it could be tempting here to just take the scale style line and then do this here. But just like for the arm side, this could be a little bit too blunt as a tool, I think. So I'm not actually sure that that's that good of an idea. Although I just scaled this up here. Let me just simulate here. I'm just curious to see what's going to happen. Because that could work well. Although yeah, look at the stretching that we're getting out of this. This really isn't all that good. So yeah, no, this is a little too that's a little bit too blunt as a tool. I really want to avoid having to add stretching to this if I can here. So let's go ahead back within our edit style line. And it's possible there too that I actually won't be able to really do this here, because I think the moment that I actually move this point inward, it also adds a lot of, it just simply adds a lot of tension around the neck. So we might actually even have to add a split to this particular jacket. Add another cut somewhere so that we can alleviate some of that pressure. I think it's probably going to be what will have to happen here. Yeah, I mean, truth be told, that's really not too bad. Having manually moved those points around, I'm getting something here that's feels a lot better than just when we were using the scale style line. But truth be told, I really like the idea of adding a few more cuts to this so that it's not as basic as it is here. So I'm actually quite tempted to add some type of cut to the shoulder. We have a few examples of that here, perhaps if we actually look around. Add some type of cut, like yeah, like here, right? Add like an extra seam or two there. The more seams that we add, the easier it is often to control for stretching, because our panels have to work individually a little bit less. So I'm kind of tempted to add a cut like this here. So that was using our draw style and button. Let's now resimulate and let's check out where we are. I do want to try to control here the stretching that's happening on the back here a little bit. So one thing we could do, and in fact, looking at this, it could be tempting to add another cut here for design purposes. Although, nah, that maybe could get a little bit wonky. Perhaps at some point during the next class, maybe we will freestyle a little bit more the design of this particular jacket there. But okay, so for now, I think I'm happy to continue working with these particular pieces here. We're starting to get within the yellow here in terms of stretching, so I don't like that. So I want to try and see if I can actually alleviate just a little bit of that pressure that is here by taking this particular panel of fabric and just giving it just a little bit more fabric, just like this here. Yeah, it's already better. So we went from yellowish to greenish. I think it's okay if there's a little bit of stretching around the neck. I mean, especially in this particular configuration, if you will, like the the coat will be closed, so we kind of expect it to be somewhat tight around the neck. I think it's actually very common, so I don't think that's necessarily a problem. And then let's play around with these curves here a little bit. So I'm getting something that's nice and round. There's not too much tension there, a little bit, but I think that's within tolerance. I have a feeling that the back here is starting to become a little bit too tight. Even if we look at our stretch map, there's not that much stretching there. But of course, if we consider this to be a coat, we actually kind of wanted to perhaps make it even a little bit bigger than that, because ultimately we might want to add something on the inside of that, right? Like a shirt on the inside or something. Um, so ultimately, I think I might even have to make this coat even just a little bit bigger than that ultimately. But we'll deal with that during the next class, I think. For now, this should be okay, and we'll probably have to reset the collision distance or the skin offset, if you will, on the avatar to be a little bit higher than 1 to, again, account just for a little bit of padding on the inside of the jacket between the skin and the jacket so that we can nicely fit a shirt in there eventually. And perhaps it's going to be a nice occasion to talk about the fitting suit. Why not? Maybe we could actually do that once we get there. So yeah, I guess we'll keep it like this for today, but there will be more adjustments needed to this particular jacket in the future. Okay, so I'm kind of happy with this overall. I think we can add the extra piece of fabric that we need here to create the collar. So we really want something that will be pretty much almost, if not exactly, a perfect cylinder. Probably not exactly a perfect cylinder, but very close to being a perfect cylinder that will wrap around the neck there. If it is a perfect cylinder, it will actually stand up in a way that's relatively stiff. And certainly if we account for giving it relatively stiff material properties there. Although if we go for more of an arc, meaning that we go for a piece of a panel of leather that goes all the way around the neck, whose outside radius is wider than the inside radius, then we will get a piece of fabric, a kind of collar that will kind of collapse on itself a little bit. What do I mean by that? Well, depending on which one of these here that we're looking at. So this one here, it's relatively cylindrical, okay, but you can see that the upper border of this particular kind of piece of leather here, the upper border seems slightly narrower than the base of it. And how narrow we make the top segment of the collar in relation to the lower segment will dictate how much this top segment will seem to collapse upon itself. So it's the kind of thing that's worth sometimes to be very precise with, but we'll try to yet again. I guess we'll try to eyeball it, so to speak, so that this class doesn't become overly technical. We'll just try to eyeball it, and hopefully we'll be able to get something that looks nice there. Okay, so we want to create a piece of leather that will wrap all the way around the neck and will open around the sternum. That is right here. So here, once again, so to know what will be the outside circumference for this particular circle or strip of leather that we are creating here, we can simply measure what is the length of all of these segments that right now comprise the lower border of this particular garment piece that we are adding. So select all the segments, and let me try to avoid clicking on any basic curve so that we avoid the bug that we have been talking about previously. So all of these here, and then we need, I believe, this here. So all of these. We could probably tweak this here a little bit, make this a little bit better. But anyway, so we have 24.11 centimeters, and then we will need that times 2 because we also want to go all the way around on the other side of the neck. So I'm going to start with a rectangle, although I suspect that ultimately it will wind up being something that will be relatively curvy, but we'll see once we get there. So let's start here with a panel, and we'll go for a height that will be perhaps 4 centimeters. Why not? We can adjust that later on. And so we can use our arrangement points here again to start to wrap around this particular cylinder fabric around the neck of the character there. So once again, let's press Shift F to show our arrangement points. And with our collar that is selected, let me click then on the arrangement point that is around the neck. And afterward, we can, within our property editor here, play around with our values to place this particular piece of leather the way that we want it to be here. So let's play around with the, let me see here. So position X, let's rotate this so that the opening is in the front. Offset here so that we can start to bring it a little bit closer to the neck. And I'm tempted just to sew it down right away to see the kind of result that we're going to get. We're going to get a collar that will be will kind of stand up as a very geometric cylinder, which might not actually look all that bad. So we could actually give that a try. And we will reshape this piece of leather later on if we need to, of course. Okay, so in terms of sewing then, we want to here again use our M to N segment sewing. So the base of this particular panel of leather is right here. I'm pressing M, by the way, just to see, as you can see, I can slide this teal dot over my panel here, over a segment of my panel, and I can see within a 3D viewport afterward where that blue dot is to make sure that the particular bottom left corner of this particular panel is indeed the bottom left corner of the panel within the 3D viewport there. So then let me use my M to N segment sewing. For the collar piece, we really only have one segment to click on, press enter, and then select all of the corresponding segments in order on the rest of the garment. Just like that, press enter. And there you go. You can see the sewing and how nice and easy that was. Yeah, so let's just give this a try. I'm curious to see the kind of result we're going to get if we simply simulate it just like this. All right, my particle distance is very different right now. So let me actually tweak this here. So let me take the collar piece we have just added. Our particle distance right now is 20. I believe the rest is 10. It could have been as low as 5 now that I think about it for some reason. So let me actually just make the rest 10 again, just for the sake of performance, really. But we'll drop it back down before we are done together today there. Yeah, so there you go. Very basic collar. So as we said, this is a cylinder. And right now the collar is, well, a little bit too, it's a little bit too flexible for its own good, right? So it's kind of collapsing under its own weight there. Of course, the way that it works in real life is that there's really no garment that is made using only one layer of material. It's usually there's an outside layer and then there's an inner layer, or at least for coats, shirts, sure. A lot of shirts are only one layer of fabric, but coats, there's typically multiple layers of fabric that are sewn together there. And sometimes there's even things in between those particular layers of fabric to give extra rigidity to certain pieces here. So it's really not all that surprising that with the same material properties for this particular collar as we have the rest of the jacket, that the collar here kind of collapses under its own weight there. It's really not surprising. There's a few ways we can address this, of course. One of them is to do just like it is in real life, which is to actually duplicate this particular panel of fabric and sew it over itself or under itself. We won't go really too far with that today, but if you're actually curious as to how we could actually go about doing that, I could actually just, as a very simple demonstration here, I could take this particular piece of letter that I have, right-click on it within our 2D pattern window, and then do a layer clone. In this particular case, over, I think, would look quite good. And this will simply duplicate this particular panel of leather, and it will sew it over itself, as you can see. And just because now there are two pieces of leather that are sewn together there, you can see that we already have a lot more rigidity to the collar, right? Just based on that here. So that's a great and very easy way to add a lot of rigidity to something. And this actually is a lot closer to what happens in real life than if we were using other tools of Marvelous Designer to be able to reach the same kind of effect. So this is definitely one of the ways that you can actually do it. And another consequence of doing this here is that now we actually have a panel of leather that is actually on top of everything else. So if I actually press Alt 1 to go within thick display, so where we can actually appreciate the thickness of our garment, you can perhaps appreciate a little bit more the fact that there is now actual thickness to the collar there because it has been doubled. So that's definitely one of the ways that we can kind of do it. Although this still winds up being a little bit too flexible for me. And truth be told, I think that these pieces of leather are right now are still a little bit too tall here. So we're at about 4 centimeters here. Let's actually just reduce these to about 3 centimeters or so. And this is a lot closer to what we had within those Pinterest images that were there. But okay, let me delete the outside layer, which has a consequence, as you can see, of making the collar collapse upon itself. So other than that, within Marvelous Designer, if we wanted to make this a little bit stronger, another option that we have at our disposal is to right-click on our panel here of leather. and do a strengthen there, or press Control H to be able to do that. And that here, once again, will give it a little bit more rigidity, as you can see. Although in this particular case, perhaps that actually becomes a little bit too much, but certainly our collar now retains its shape a lot better there. So I press Control H to remove the strengthening. And there's other ways we could strengthen this off, of course, other than the ways that we have just talked about here. There are actually many, many ways within Marvelous Designer that we could do this. But for now, I think that's good enough for us. I really like the idea of doubling, actually, my panels whenever I can, because once again, I think that's what actually brings us closer to what happens in real life. And every time that you can make something in CG or in Marvelous Designer that is closer to how something is constructed in real life, usually that's where you get the most realistic results, really. So my approach is usually just to double fabric whenever I want to strengthen things, but it's not necessarily always the only approach or necessarily always the correct approach. And certainly that also comes with a load of complications. If you double fabric left and right, if you start doubling a lot of panels here that you have over a coat, you obviously have to deal with the potential interpenetration between the layers that you have, and there too there are ways we can deal with that, of course. But this starts to go really deep within the rabbit hole here. So those are the kind of things that we will cover in other classes, and that we have also covered in the past, in fact, in other classes on Agenda Studio with Marvelous Designer. But okay, other than talking about strengthening this particular collar, let's talk about what we have said, which is how can we get a little bit more of a tapering going on to this particular cylinder of leather that we have around the neck here. In a nutshell, the idea is actually pretty simple. If we want this to be tapered, we have to simply make one of the edges narrower than the other edge, or one of the segments. Let's say this is the top segment here. We have to make the top segment narrower than the bottom segment. That's essentially how we can build a little bit of tapering in there. Now, you could be tempted to taper this to simply take, let's say, this particular edge that is here, take this particular segment, or take these points and kind of smush them in like these so that the top is narrower than the bottom. But that actually won't do much for you, because you can see that the overall color, now we've built a little bit of a V shape here because of how we have shaped the extreme segments, if you will, of this particular piece of leather. We're getting a bit of a V shape, but the whole collar really hasn't really changed much. So that's actually not the way that we want to do it if we want to really reach a tapered look for this particular collar there. The way that we should actually be doing this, I'm going to press C to go within curve edit mode. And what we want to do is to essentially do this. Even not a bad idea to perhaps save this file before you do what I'm about to do, because if you don't do it properly, you can actually severely distort this particular rectangle of fabric or of leather. And it can be hard if you don't actually do it properly to get something that's going to work well. So anyway, just save your scene before you do whatever we're going to do here. But essentially, if we want to keep it relatively simple and work relatively quickly with this, what I can do is, by pressing C and going within edit curvature mode, what I can do is to simply do this here, create an arc, and do the same kind of arc on the top segment afterward. And afterward, take these particular points. And actually, what I should perhaps do in this particular case is actually just add internal lines like these, because I always want these corners to be at 90 degrees. So I've added 2 internal lines. Now I can just do a cut and sew, or rather, sewing part is not necessary because we actually want to get rid of these. And just like so. So now we are winding up with an inside edge that is narrower than the outside edge. And the whole piece now is actually a little bit too long here. So our piece right now, you can see that the bottom edge, I know it's probably hard to see, but the bottom edge right now is now about 45 centimeters. So now we want to actually scale all of this down here a little bit. So our top edge now is about 39 centimeters. Our bottom edge is 42 centimeters, which means that if I simulate here again, and I will simply freeze the rest of the coat right now, because I don't want this to be disturbed, because the collar is right now interpenetrating through the rest of the coat. As I simulate now, the collar will get back where it needs to be there. And we have that tapering now that's built in more. So you can see on the sides here of the collar how the collar is actually, it seems to be nicely wrapping around the neck there. So that's really, really good. Of course, I haven't done this using symmetry. You can see this is just one piece of fabric, but it works well enough for me right now that I don't think that I need to symmetrize this. Although, of course, we could split this down the middle. We could, and then we could unfold the segment that is in the middle of the collar so that we wind up having collar that is perfectly symmetrical. But I think I'm okay with this for now. And yeah, so we haven't done this exactly. So we actually have slight variations in terms of width. I don't necessarily hate it. It makes this look more handmade, I suppose, as a piece of fabric. There are ways to do this mathematically using a lot of precision to make sure that we wind up having the exact arcs that we need. And we have covered that on Agnes.studio, and we do have tools for that. In fact, so there is a class where we talk about how to create arcs like these with very precise dimensions when we want to actually create an arc that is very, very precise. But once again, for today, I think this will be sufficient for us. Let me unfreeze the rest of the code, resimulate again, and you can see the kind of result that we're getting now. Okay, by the way, let me just, there was a little adjustment here that I wanted to do. Let me just do this here very quickly. Take this point here, convert it to curve point, and then afterward, clean up the curve points that are there, just like so. I can try playing with my Styleline tune here, my Styleline editing button here, just to kind of straighten up the back portion. And that's working quite well. Yeah, I think I will actually go ahead and symmetrize this here so that the changes that we do wind up being symmetrical, for lack of a better term there. So I actually kind of like the idea of doing that here. So because I'm not sure where the exact middle is for these two arcs, at least for the top arc that is here, what I can do is just select the particular segment that is right here, right-click on it, and then let's do a split from our menu. And here we will simply say uniform split, split into two segments. So this gives us here a point that is at the perfect middle of this particular segment that we had there. Let me then create an internal line that is as perpendicular as I can. Take it, do a cut and sew on it. Delete one side. Which side do we like the most? I like this one here. So let's get rid of this one here. Select the middle edge then, right-click on it, and do a unfold symmetric editing with sewing. And there you go. So let's simulate here yet again. Place the collar back where it needs to be. I like the idea of keeping just a very, very small gap here, like a 1 centimeter gap, so that we have some space here to put our zipper. So let me just add an internal line like this, and then cut it, and delete the extra piece of fabric that we have. Simulate here yet again. There you go. And now we can add the zipper going down the jacket on the front of the jacket. So for the front panel of leather that we have right here, I'm going to take the middle line that is right here. We are going to convert it to a cut and sew line. And this allows us to convert this particular seam that we have here. We're actually going to just delete it here, and we are going to replace that with a zipper. So to add our zipper then, we're simply going to select the zipper here button from our 3D window toolbar. And wherever we start creating the zipper will be where the little head of the zipper, I don't know how that's actually called, but the little head of the zipper will be placed here. So we want to start the zipper from the top here, and then we will zip all the way down to the bottom of the middle of the front of the jacket there. So start on one side, click on one of the points, drag all the way down, double click on the bottom extremity, and then do the same thing on the other side. And there you go. We can now simulate. And we now have a zipper that is placed on the front of our jacket. If you're wondering how can we edit this particular zipper if we don't want it to be completely closed, it's very, very simple. Let's just grab here our select move tool from our 3D window toolbar, and then click on the zipper. And once you have it clicked, you can actually just drag it down here. As you can see, if you want to actually open up the zipper there a little bit, simulate again. And there you go. You can actually open the jacket like this if you don't want it to be completely closed. As one final detail, if you want to be kind of cute with this, we could actually add a button to the collar so that we could actually close the collar as well. Since we often see this here on these type of jackets here, you can see there's actually a little bit of a button here where the zipper is, so that we can actually fasten the collar as well. So we could actually do that here. That will be very simple for us to do. So let's take first this particular panel that we have, and we want to just extend part here of this particular panel just a little bit here by like a few centimeters. Now, of course, if I do actually extend it here, it will extend it on both sides, which we don't necessarily want, but it really is the simplest way that we can do this to create that extra piece of letter that we need here. So we're going to extend this, and then we are going to cut the extended part, and we will only keep it on one side. So I'm going to take here the segment that I want to extend. I'm going to right click on it, offset pattern outline, and we're going to add this at about, I guess maybe 3 centimeters would be pretty good in this particular case. Perhaps 4. I think 4 starts to become maybe a little bit too much. So let's keep it at 3 here. And we're going to make sure to turn on here create internal line so that we get an internal line that is created at the current segment, at the current edge here of the particular color that we have. Click OK. And then we will right click on the internal line that got created, do a cut and sew. And we'll erase the part here, the extra panel that we do not want to keep. We can see that we have a seam that connects this extra piece of leather to the collar. So it's going to stay in place. We can just simulate. And now we can add a button to this. So to add a button here, what we're going to do, we're going to use the button, for lack of a better term, that is right here within our 3D window toolbar. So let's go to button here, and we're just going to click where we want to place this. There we go, just like that. We can afterwards select it, and we could actually change its style here so that it looks like something a little bit different. Well, I guess we can't here. We actually have only one choice. So I was sure there were usually multiple buttons in here, so I'm not too sure what's going on there. But anyway, we could always change this particular detail in another 3D software if we wanted to. So, okay, so to mirror the button, then we need to add a buttonhole, of course. So let's go ahead and do that. Just like so. We might actually have to move it around. It might not actually be placed where it needs to. So we can always go to Edit Button, select Move Button, in fact, and we can just move it here a little bit if it's not exactly where it needs to be. And then within our property editor, we can play with the angle here to angle it properly. So let's see here, like this should be pretty good. And so this will allow us to fasten the button whenever we want here. So within our 3D window, if we put our cursor over the button, we can then click on Fasten button, which will allow us to say, you go right here. And just like that. Now, of course, visually speaking, buttons are not the strong suit of Marvelous Designer. And right now it's actually fastened on the wrong side. But if I keep pulling on this, I'll be able to, as you can see, take this particular piece of leather and just make it fold on the proper side of things. And of course, I might have to actually play with where this button is connected because it might not actually be placed where it needs to be right now. So let's actually play around. Let me take this particular panel here. Let me just move it around here. So we definitely very likely want to edit the positioning of this button. I have a feeling this could be a little bit further in this direction and maybe this one a little bit further in this direction. And as you can see, buttons can be a little bit finicky. It's more of a detail to add in the end. Of course, we definitely can, if we create a shirt and we absolutely need to have buttons, we can create them relatively early on. But often it's more of a detail to keep, I think, more as a visual detail, I think, that we can add later on. And we don't even have the right button head in this particular case. So we definitely would have to go and change that button head afterward within another 3D software. Or I'm certain that I've seen different button types here. I really am surprised that this is the only default button that we have within our drop-down menu. But I will look into that, and we'll speak more about that in a future class if need be. But anyway, for now, I actually just want to have this button here more as a to add a little bit of flavor and just to show you how it actually works, more than I desiring to have this as an actual detail that is necessary right now for the design of the code there. So that's how we add buttons. I'm going to delete it. I don't actually want to keep it for now, just to make our life simple here. So let me also delete the buttonhole. And so what we're going to do then, just to finish off this particular collar then, is we're now in a great position to reinforce and strengthen the collar there. So now's a good idea to take all our panels that create the collar. And yet again here, let's do a right click on those and let's do a symmetric, or rather layer clone over. And this will strengthen our collar significantly. Other things that we could do, of course, is to play around with the material properties and have a different type of leather that's a little bit stiffer for the collar than what we have for the rest of the jacket. That is another way that we could strengthen this even more. We could add more layers of fabric. We could add bonding. We could strengthen this. There's a lot of ways that we could actually strengthen this if it's not strong enough for us. But I think for the purposes of the demonstration today, I think this is actually quite satisfactory. And let me finally just drop our particle distance back down here. So we're at 10. Let me put that back down to 5. And let's simulate again. One thing that isn't all that great, actually, if we actually look at the collar here, is that there is a collision distance between all of these panels, and the result of which means that this leather collar starts to look like a little bit inflated, like a tiny little pillow, if you actually kind of look at it. That's because of the collision distance between all these different panels of leather there. And the collision distance makes it so that the panels of leather are trying to push away from each other. So one thing I could actually do is just to reduce the collision distance for the panels of leather that are around the collar. So I'm going to select all of them. And then afterward, we'll go within our property editor where it says add thickness collision in millimeters here. You can see we're at the default value of 2.5. Let's just drop this down to 0.5. And the consequence of which is that now you can see that our panels of leather will be much closer to each other there. I could also, if I want to be cute, perhaps, one thing I could do is to take the inner layers and strengthen those here. So press Control H on those. And now we're getting a leather collar that is much, much stronger. So there's a lot more work that we can and we certainly will do to this particular jacket. I'm quite happy to stop here because I think that this is a good place to stop. We've covered all the basics as to how to edit this particular garment, how to create it from scratch within Marvelous Designer. There's some fitting issues that needs to be addressed here. And also, we could definitely continue playing with the sleeves, make the sleeves a little bit tighter near the near where the arms are. I think the sleeves are right now a little bit too wide. So that's the kind of work that we could continue to do. Continue tweaking the sleeves, make this opening here a little bit narrower. There's a whole lot of work that is left to do in this particular jacket, and we will continue that in our next class on Outgang.studio. But this shows you all of the basics that you need to go through to be able to create a garment within Marvelous Designer, from creating it out of panels, how to shape those particular panels, how to use the Styleline editing feature of Marvelous Designer 12 to continue tweaking the shape of the panels, how to go about getting a proper fit for your garment, how to go about tweaking that, how to scale up the garment if ever your garment is overly tight, the way that we had it, how to go about setting material properties that comes closer to the type of materials that you are looking to work with. And so for the next class then of Marvelous Designer, we will continue this particular jacket. We will continue tweaking it. We'll probably even change the color for something else. I really want to go for a particular design for this particular jacket that will be nicely asymmetrical. So I actually don't necessarily want to have the zipper for it be smack down the middle of the jacket. I actually kind of want it to be perhaps somewhere off on the side and go for something that's a lot more asymmetric in terms of design here. So we're going to have a lot of fun design-wise, and we're going to continue to detail this particular jacket. We're going to continue to work on it. We're going to continue to work on the sleeves, make the sleeves tighter and have a more interesting design. And we're probably going to even introduce different materials in here so that it's not only leather, but perhaps we have other pieces in here that are made out of nylon or something else, just to start to add a lot more visual interest to this particular design. So stick around for the next part of this particular class. But I hope that so far, at the very least, everything that we have covered has been of great help to you and that you have learned a few things in the process there. So keep an eye out on Outgang.studio for part 2 of this particular class. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.